Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Yountville Town Council meeting for Tuesday, October 4th, 2016. I'll, first of all, welcome some faces that we recognize and some that we don't see all that frequently, so thank you all for being here. Go ahead and have the clerk call roll, please.
Councilmember Dorenbecker.
Here.
Councilmember Durham.
Here.
Vice Mayor Moeller.
Here.
Mayor Dunbar.
Here. And I've invited Terry Moylan to please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Pretty cute.
Thank you, Terry. We'll be hearing from Terry shortly, or speaking to Terry shortly. Next up is our adoption of tonight's agenda. Are there any? I didn't see any corrections or changes.
No, none.
I make a motion we adopt tonight's agenda.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that passes unanimously. So let's get right to it. It's always our great pleasure to be able to recognize the dedicated hard work, commitment to our community of any members of our Yountville team. We have somebody very special to us today who has been with us for 28 years. So I invite Terry Moylan to please join me at the podium so we can present a proclamation.
Sorry.
We'll see how Kenneth are, actually you come this way and face toward me so we can both be on that camera for the world to see. So if you want to come this way, then we'll all be covered. All right. There we go. This is a proclamation commending and honoring Terrence Moylan, utility operator, on the occasion of his retirement. Whereas Terrence Moylan was employed by the town of Yountville for 28 years as a wastewater treatment plant operator, beginning on March 22nd, 1988. Whereas during his tenure with the town, Terry distinguished himself in his professional dedication and commitment to the town of Yountville. And whereas during his career, Terrence Moylan was involved in a significant number of plant upgrades and changes to help maintain the plant and associated utilities, including, most recently, the Title 22 upgrade project and the recycled water expansion project that allowed the town to beneficially reuse 89% of the effluent generated by the wastewater treatment plant in 2015 for irrigation of several vineyards and one golf course. And whereas Terry was known for his commitment to the town infrastructure and town staff, including his many late-night efforts during major and minor storm events, Terry also had an exemplary attendance record, missing only 2 days of his 28 years with the town.
Wow.
Whereas, I know that is awe-inspiring. No pressure, no pressure. Some of you have failed that already. Whereas Terry, who is often seen walking his beloved dog around town, will now have even more time to enjoy those regular walks. Whereas Terrence Moylan retired on September 26, 2016. Now therefore be it resolved by the Mayor and Town Council for the Town of Yountville on this 4th day of October 2016 that Terrence Moylan will always be appreciated and commended by this Town Council and Town staff for his faithful, outstanding, professional, and dedicated service to the Town of Yountville, and that we are proud to be of his association. That the Town Council and Town staff do hereby extend their best wishes to Terrence Moylan for continued health, happiness, and success in all of his future endeavors in his retirement. Okay, if you'd like to share a few thoughts. And also, my sidekick is going to remind remind me that this
Okay.
is a bottle for you to share in your retirement, not while you're out on one of your walks, but when you're back.
All right, thank you very much. I appreciate that greatly. I just wanted to say a few words. In the 28 years that I've worked for the town of Yountville, there's been one goal that I've set out to try to achieve, and that was to leave the plant better than the way I found it. And I have to say that over the years, some of the improvements to the plant have been accomplished, and I'm very proud of the fact that the town-wide recycling program of different materials was accomplished. Reclaimed water pumping and pond water level monitors were set in place. Sewer line interconnects so that we had greater capacity for the town system. Many sewer pipes and manholes, which meant less infiltration and greater capacity for the pump station to handle those flows. And also the installation of grease interceptors to start a fog program here in town. All of this, it was just a small part that I played. You know, there were, of course, many others that did the hard work and got the plans made and got in place. I have to say that all of my fellow employees that supported me throughout the years, I greatly appreciate all the help that you've given to me. Even when there were some mistakes that I made that were probably memorable, I won't get into the numerous occasions, but you know, I can't be denying that I didn't have a perfect record. Those 2 days are probably the days that I was sent home. And I wish to thank the town council for all the support that they gave the wastewater department and the funding. And it really has improved the quality of life here in Yountville. And I know it's taken a lot of effort and long hours and meetings to get some of these things done. And the town council has been very good to give generous salaries and benefits to all the employees, which that's part of the reason why I think a lot of employees stay here for a longer period of time. And so all of that, I have to say one big thank you. There's one area that, of course, I wish I could have said that I solved the problem, and unfortunately, there's an issue on occasion with what goes into the sewer. I wish we could have a perfect system where everything would flow just nicely, but unfortunately, that's life, you know. It's going to take some aggressive effort to make sure that everyone uses the system properly. And thank you again.
Thank you. Well, it's clearly a sign of respect that we get your fellow Public Works crew out here. They don't like to come out here very often, so we know when they do, it's for something special. So thanks both to you and your wife for really committing your lives to serving Yountville. We very much appreciate it. Next up, we're going to go on to public comment. So now would be the time for any item not on tonight's agenda to be brought up. We will be having comments from the public during our agendized items. But if there is anything else for anyone here, seeing no one move forward other than our staff moving seats, we'll go on to our consent calendar. Is there any discussion or action on our consent items tonight?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the consent calendar as presented.
I second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
That is approved unanimously. Moving on to our presentation tonight, Geographic Information Systems GIS update. Is this you, Joe?
This is
start?
Nathan Steele and I will be presenting, co-presenting this evening. I'll start it off. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, tonight we are very proud to give you a bit of an update on our GIS system. As you know, we have been working on this system for a few years now, and we are to the point now where we're starting to add some features that are both helpful to the staff, and we're also able to do some public-facing features as well. So one of the features that we have tonight is on our website, actually. So you can anyone who has access to the web can go to our town website. They can access this page through the Public Works section of the page. Go to the Capital Improvement Projects tab and look under the project map, and we will pop that up here in a short while. So what you see here is what they're calling in the GIS nomenclature a storyboard. So Nathan Steele has created this product out of projects that we've had going on and projects that have been completed. So what you see is 4 tabs on your right-hand side. The construction tab, which is projects that are currently under construction. We have the pre-construction tab, which is projects that are in the queue and ready to go under construction. And then we have the green tab, which is planning, projects that are going to go under construction this year. And then the blue tab is the projects that we have completed. So let's just look at the red tab, under construction. The biggest project that we have under construction right now is Yountville Crossroad. So if somebody selects that tab, it'll bring up the road segment on your left-hand side. It will also bring up a small description and a picture on your right-hand side, including some information on contacting the project manager. And if you look at the very bottom of that description, there's a little hyperlink that says here. So if you click on that hyperlink, it'll take you to a larger description on a different page and give you the entire detail of that project. So for those of us who are interested, and for anyone who has any interest in the projects that we have ongoing, we're going to continue to populate these pages and update these pages and the information that's on them. So if we look at the second tab, that's the Veterans Park. So that tab is purple. That means it's in pre-construction. We are anticipating going to construction on the week of the 17th, as it says on the projects page. It again lists the project manager, and once again you can click on that tab, expand it, get a view of the map and the details that include this project, that details this project and all of the variable elements that are included in this project. Again, it's just a way to get more information out in a different fashion, stuff that we have captured as a part of our GIS program. Nathan went to some training earlier this year, and I said, well, one of the questions we always ask when we come back from training is, what did you learn that you can use now, and what are you going to bring on to line at some point in the distant future? And so Nathan said, well, I think we can do a storyboard on CIP. I said, that sounds great. What does that mean? And so this is what he came up with. So I just think, we can do the traditional PowerPoint slides, and people are very familiar with those, but this is a way to do that same story in a real story fashion and get people who are interested in it to be able to look at it a little or a lot, depending on what their interest is. So if you look at some of the things that Nathan's playing with, you can actually look at as much or as little as you want and get as much detail or as little detail as you want, and also get the information for the contact of the person who's managing the project. So we're very excited about this particular storyboard, and as a matter of fact, I think we have, how many sites have we?
The Yountville Capital Project story map has already been viewed more than 400 times, and that's with simply putting it on the website. And then later on I'll show a little bit more of another story map that we have for other projects in town. One of the beneficial parts of this method of displaying the information is almost everyone knows how to use Google Maps. You go on Google Maps and you start playing around, and people will often just waste time saying, oh look, I can see my house, satellite, how fun. What's nice about this is you can go in as deep or as far away as you'd like, and you can understand, why is that street under construction right now? What is going on? And so just by here you can see, oh, there's the big red street. I can click on it right there, and it'll give me all the information I need. If I click that link that Joe already highlighted, I can go in and find links to all of the history of the project, including the times it was discussed at town council meetings. I can see the resolutions and the staff reports tied to that project. So if anyone has any questions, while of course we always welcome them to call us, there's also those more introverted that would prefer to do the research on their own. We wanted to make that available for them.
And we're going to continue to add content and to add access as this continues to grow and our knowledge of this system continues to grow. So I'll turn the next part of this presentation over to Nathan. He's going to talk a little bit about the next page that he has.
Right. So another one of the maps that we've created, it is within the planning department. As you know, planning department receives applications for development projects, both public and private, and they will often go to the Zoning and Design Review Board for review and approval, as well as the town council. And one of the things that we wanted to do was allow people to go in to the planning department website and see what are all the projects that are in the queue. I feel like attending a town council meeting next week. I want to see what kind of projects I can comment on. And so right here on the homepage, there's a development map where you can click this link, and we'll get the Yountville Development Projects map. This map we were a little surprised at how popular it has become. This morning, before a management team meeting, we had just over 600 views, so we thought, hey, that's pretty nice. By the time that meeting ended, we were over 800 views. So those hundreds of people looking at it aren't town staff because we were all in a meeting. So there's someone else out there that either likes viewing a map 100 times, or there's several people in the community that are interested in these development projects. Similar format as the previous one, all these projects are listed as either pending review, already approved, under construction, or already completed. So you look in here, you can see upcoming projects, things like the Bellagio Resort, things like the Vintage Inn, having both the applicant information as well as the case planner with an email if you have any questions for it. Going on to the approved, you can see recently approved projects. Keep sliding over. You can see the ones that are currently under construction, with the French Laundry expansion as one, and then recently completed ones, such as residential or commercial projects. One of the things we wanted to highlight with this map in particular is town staff was in contact with staff from Esri, the folks that make all this software, and they wanted to feature this map in their international gallery of maps to show, oh, here's a fun way to do a story map. So that was a nice kudos to receive, to know that these maps are not only useful to the town, but they are also a creative and innovative way of using the software to get information out that isn't just a plain text staff report or 30 PowerPoint slides and an update. Something like this is both intriguing and fun to get the message across and all the information in. And as Joe mentioned, we're going to be adding more and more to these, and these are live programs. They're never done, just as the town is never done with its capital projects, or no one will ever develop anymore. Just as those projects are continuing, so too will these maps always continue. So.
Thank you, Nathan. I would also like to say that this is in addition to our ongoing use of the Myville app. So for those of you in the audience who haven't downloaded the Myville app, you can go to the App Store, or you can use your Droid device and go to the App Store in that particular market and download the Myville app. So recently we added a Mutt-Mitt station map to that map content. So we're continuing to update those maps based on both customer feedback and what we've noticed could improve our own mapping system. So again, it's a live system. We continue to kind of try to innovate. We're open to suggestions for those of you who are out there thinking that you want a particular map, or that you could use some kind of a way to locate something that's here in town. We're happy to try to do that if we can. We just need to get a little bit of feedback so that we can help get that moving along. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions or comments that you might have on this really great project.
Thank you. And I don't know what I'm going to do now. that I can't tease you about the number of PowerPoint slides you have in your presentations, but we'll figure something out.
That did come into our conversation as we were creating the storyboard map.
Questions? I do have a question about this feature here, the email access. If you go to the window on the right, does it automatically populate the subject, or do you have to know what you're emailing back?
We can easily program it that way. So if I click on this one here, we can program it so it says Stuart Sellers question, or if it's over here, I can make it a Protea question. But as of right now, it's a blank subject line that someone would have to fill in.
Thinking it might be a nice feature to add, because it's such a great way to be directly engaged with the right person, but that way there's not a potential for confusion about what topic it is that's being highlighted. Might also help when that project manager is storing emails by subject.
Certainly,
So,
that's an easy thing to add.
okay, I think this is a great use of the technology, and it's very simple. Like you say, if you don't know how to use Google Maps, then have a 10-year-old show you how to do it. Great. Well, thank you very much for that update. Looking forward to more updates when we get more great uses out of all this.
There's a lot more fun ones in the works.
Good. Thank you.
I have
Yeah,
Just-
Vice Mayor?
just one comment. I love all this stuff. I think it's really great. I'd like to make a suggestion for really getting the word out. Samantha's not here, but she's got that great golden ticket program, and people are just looking at all this great stuff to sign up for. You might want to talk to her. I would imagine that you would have a lot of residents if you offered a tutorial about not only the My Yville map, but also our website. Now that there's a lot of stuff there, it's just a matter of getting the word out, and I think you might get some interested people who would sign up to hear about this stuff. So
It's a great idea.
All right, very good.
Thank you very much.
We're going to move on to our public hearing for tonight. It is the Bardessono Development Agreement, Master Development Plan, and Use Permit Amendments. And before we get into that item, Vice Mayor has disclosure.
I will be recusing myself from this item because I have real property within 500 feet of the property that will be under discussion. So,
Okay.
and I should be out there someplace when you're
All
done.
right, we'll find you. Okay, now we can go ahead and proceed, and we'll start with a staff report. Sandra.
Thank you. Could I go over here? Yeah. Good evening. Tonight you have before you a request by the Bardessono Hotel to amend the master development plan, including use permit and design review, to add a villa at the location of the previous residential parcel. And that parcel is located at the southeast portion of the Bardessono Hotel, and I will share some of the history with the property and the development with you. Starting in 2004, the property received approval for a rezone to the Planned Development Zoning District, and that district is one that allows mixed uses and creative designs, and it included the 62-room hotel property, the 25-unit affordable housing project known as Arroyo Grande, and the single-family residential parcel shown here in this slide, and that is the subject of tonight's staff report. In 2006, the hotel received design review and use permit to proceed with that development, and in 2009, the subject parcel received approval, design review approval for a single-family residence. Then in 2012, the single-family residential owner and the hotel came together before the town council to amend the development agreement in order to provide an option of proceeding with a single-family residence or converting it to a two-suite lodging unit to support the hotel and become part of the hotel. Provided that the footprint was the same as the residential footprint, and provided that the applicant would receive use permit approval. The applicant did not pursue that at that time, but that is the application, or part of the application, that is now before you tonight. So the proposal is to increase the number of suites that are provided in this potential lodging unit from 2 that was approved in the DA in 2012 to 3 that is before you tonight. And the structure has been designed with a flexible interior design that will allow it to be separated into either 1, 2, or 3 suites. And that customization is useful to the applicant, although they indicate that they believe it will be rented most often as a single deluxe suite, known as the villa. So each of the units are designed with separate entrances that are shown here on this slide, and each will have private outdoor areas, pools and water features, outdoor fireplaces, and televisions. And the design that was approved, or that is proposed, is substantially similar to that was approved for the single-family residence. In terms of footprint, the proposed design is approximately 150 square feet smaller. On the south elevation, that is the second line on this slide, the applicant has pulled the building back 3 feet to have greater and deeper setbacks to the pedestrian path in order to create larger outdoor areas for the guests. And the height is substantially similar in that it features flat roof lines of 2 different heights. The changes are that the lower roof line will be 6 inches shorter, while as the taller roof line will be just over a foot taller at 16 feet. The size and massing, as you can see here, is very similar to that was approved, and the materials and colors are likewise very similar, except that the modifications here really bring it into closer alignment and tie it more closely to the Bardessono Hotel. But as with both designs, they featured the stained cedar siding, the Core 10 panels, and the painted metal fascia. One of the more significant changes from the approved design is with the proposed fencing. And approved fencing was more of a more residential scale. It was horizontal wood fencing, whereas a proposed fencing that you can see here on the bottom portion of the side is a combination of alternating segments of the wood fencing and concrete block that features the steel trellises in front of it, and which will be planted with vine to somewhat soften that elevation. Another difference is in the location of the proposed fencing, and I'll show here a photo of the approved design. This was the approved single-family residence, and you can see that the fencing is pulled back from the property line in order to create landscape beds that created a layered look for plant with shrubs and trees, and it really softened that elevation. It is important to note here what you see is that the building pad is raised for the subject parcel, and that it's retained by a retaining wall that is on the east side and for most of the south side. And the result of that wall is that it increases the building pad by about 3 feet. So that southeast corner potentially is quite high. The applicant is proposing to, I also wanted to mention this, at this corner here on the left facing the vineyard, this is where the entrance was and there was no fencing proposed. The applicant is proposing the fencing shown here, which pulls or pushes the walls and fences back to property line to sit atop that retaining wall, which reduces the amount of articulation on the facade. The landscaping is limited to the vines rather than a more layered look. And as I noted, at that southeast corner that would be the tallest atop the retaining wall, it's up to 9 feet tall. So the subject parcel, which is about 10,000 square feet, and the Bardessono Hotel property, which is about 5 acres, are both located within the Plan Development Zoning District that I mentioned. This is intended to allow mixed-use land uses that are compatible with the community, and it permits a flexible approach to design and the site planning of structures and open space and other structures for a variety of reasons, one of which I noted is for this creative design. It allows flexibility with the development standards in the zoning and design ordinance as to such areas such as FAR and fence height, and other development standards. And it also grants an FAR bonus to residential portions of a mixed-use plan development project where the affordable housing threshold is met. And in reviewing the project, it is in compliance with the town's general plan, the zoning ordinance, the design ordinance, and we go into detail for each of these different sections in the staff report. I am only going to touch on what we believe the most important considerations of the project are and perhaps foster some discussion later. One of those is FAR. The approved FAR for the single-family residence was 37%, and this took into account some exemptions for the garage, and it was higher than the more typical allowed 25% for residential uses because the affordable housing threshold was met with the Arroyo Grande project. It had the 25 units, so this entitled the single-family residential structure to an FAR of up to 40%. Commercial uses in a PD district are generally held to the commercial standards, and in all three of the commercial zones, that's 25% for commercial uses, plus an additional 15% for office uses or for apartment uses on site. But as I noted, the PD district itself allows variations and exceptions specifically as to FAR, which could allow that to be increased over 25%. I want to note that the hotel as developed has an FAR of 27%, and the other hotel in the planned development zoning district is the Hotel Yountville, and that development is at 28%. The proposed villa that is part of this application would sit on a separate 10,000 square foot parcel, but it would be really incorporated into the hotel and would share all the site amenities. So the idea is it becomes part and parcel of that greater use. But when you consider it as a separate legal parcel, FAR is 40%. If the parcel were merged with the remainder of the hotel property, it would bring that FAR down to 28%. And so staff's evaluation is that the FAR is consistent with the development standards, and that there are even other factors that support that slightly higher FAR. One is that the proposed structure is 150 square feet smaller than the approved structure. So in terms of size and massing and impacts to neighbors and those on public vantage points like the path, the impact is essentially the same or slightly smaller. The setbacks from this unit, too, are greater than you normally see in a residential zone where yards back up to one another. This is separated by the paths in both cases, but also by the creek. And that commercial uses can be higher, but that specifically planned development units can be developed higher. So we are finding that there is some justification for the FAR that is presented. Another item we want to discuss that I'd like to share with you is the fencing. And the fencing is shown in the top of each of these slides. It shows the west elevation. I think the most important is the south elevation. Oh, and I need to go back. I'm going to pull up the south elevation again, which is shown here. So as I mentioned, the approved fencing was pulled back from the corner. It allowed these landscape planters. It allowed for layering of landscaping, and it really softened the built environment in this location. It also created a nice transition between commercial and residential uses when they're in such close proximity to one another. And under this proposal, instead of the residential fence, it's these alternating segments of fence. The fence segments are taller because the retaining wall and the block wall are incorporated into a single structure rather than being separate, and that increases the height to 9 feet. And while the PD district does allow exceptions as to fence height, and the trellis and the vine will offer some softening of this, staff thinks this does provide an opportunity to pull the fence back, to provide some articulation of the fence, to bring more of a transitional nature to this development, so it doesn't appear so commercial right at this transition zone. Another issue that we'd like to present is that of noise. And I think it's important to note that the footprint of the proposed structure was the same as the approved single-family residence. And the reason that's important is that it has a residential orientation with the yards and outdoor areas focused outward on the property and really toward the adjoining neighbors more rather than inward, let's say for a more commercial property. And that furthermore, under this proposal, the yards are increased in size, both due to the increased south setback and pushing the walls and fences to property line. And so staff does have some concerns with noise that can come from these outdoor use areas. They're obviously an important part of the use, and especially when it's a lodging guest rather than a long-term tenant. We know that when this project was last before you in 2012, that there were residents of Toyon Terrace and Heritage Estates that expressed concerns as to noise. So we know that the neighbors have that as a concern. And over the years, we've also heard from a resident at who lives at Arroyo Grande as to just noise impacts in general with the commercial operations of the Bartisono Hotel. And while we've only heard from that one resident, we've heard enough to know that there are noise concerns and there is a close proximity of uses. So we're suggesting some conditions of approval to mitigate those issues. And one it would be to prohibit the wiring for outdoor sound or amplified music of any kind at the villas because that's so hard to monitor and enforce by staff, those sound levels. We're also proposing that the applicant develop internal policies on how to mitigate and minimize the operational noise and employee noise. And based on the feedback of the one resident that lives so close to that rear parking lot and that has 19 cars in it for employees for multiple shifts, that the electronic car locking and unlocking mechanism leads to a lot of beeps. So in most cases, those horns can be silenced, and we think that that would go a long way to minimizing some of the impacts. Parking is the last issue I'll touch upon. And the existing uses require 90 parking spaces, and 90 spaces are provided in the lot. That's based on the ratio for each of the hotel rooms, as well as the seats in the restaurant. Under the current proposal, the applicant would need to find 3 spaces. 2 of those are proposed on the subject parcel itself, but the applicant indicates they can do greater stacking in the valet lot to accommodate an additional 4 cars. So we've included both of those as conditions of approval. And we are also including a condition that the hotel's 150 employees participate in the town's employee parking management program, which entails payment of a fee per vehicle, the issuance of a hanging placard per vehicle, and the requirement that they park in designated parking zones. And we believe that the monitoring and involvement of staff will go a long way in reducing the parking impact of employees on the street. And so other than the few issues that I've noticed and as addressed in the conditions of approval, we are supportive of the project, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for the thorough review. Questions of the staff report before we get into the public hearing?
I do not have any.
I'm sorry, I did want to mention we received some letters.
I was going to mention that when we got into the public hearing. Councilmember Durham, anything specific?
Have there been specific noise issues about the guests at the property, or mostly employees and just the business operations?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the first part of your sentence.
I am on.
These are always on.
Have there been specific noise issues about the guests, or is it mostly the employees?
General operations with the pool deck from time to time have come up. And then mostly employees, yes, with the rear parking lot. And just some of that back-of-house operational noise along the back driveway.
And then, if I read the parking, their parking plan properly, were they moving some of that to the front stacked area?
No, those 19 employee spaces in that rear parking lot will be maintained, and the expectation is that employees will continue to use it.
Okay, very good.
Just a couple questions here. Going back to the 2012 approval for the 2-suite lodging unit, was that, did you say that was approximately the same 4,000 square feet?
It was, yes. Well, let me clarify that approval back in 2012 was an amendment to the development agreement to show that the town was open to considering that change in use. on that same single-family residential footprint. They never followed up with the use permit that would have given them rights to develop it.
But the unit, the residential had been approved at 4,000.
It had, yes.
So
Yes,
the footprint is
essentially the
almost
same.
the same. Let's see, a couple others. I wanted to go back over the wall height. I seem to recall the immediate neighbors to the south had their fences raised. Are they at 9 feet? Do we know?
No, I believe they're at 7 feet. There's that,
And lattice?
yeah, they're raised a foot on the bottom to get the 6-foot tall fence.
So then we're talking about potentially 9 total feet in elevation on the other side of the path now with the grade height plus the fence.
Yes.
And the fence would look the same height all the way around the east and south elevations. Is that accurate, with different textures?
Well, it will appear the tallest at that southeast corner because that's where the retaining wall is the deepest, and it'll
Right.
taper off on the sides. But it'll have the appearance of the alternating segments of wood and block.
And then the
concrete block.
furthest west, it stops just at the courtyard entrance to what's proposed as the first suite? Is that,
No,
or it extends all the way past that?
it extends all the way to Vineyard, to property line,
Okay.
where that segment was open before.
And you kind of went quickly through the FAR. First of all, we can consider an exception to the numbers, regardless of what the numbers are. We can consider an exception to that.
Correct.
The residents, let's see if I have my notes correct. Typically, if this was a standalone commercial property or project, it'd be 25% with some other increases possible depending on things like the affordable housing component.
Not necessarily affordable housing, but for an apartment on site. So it's for the
Providing
apartment
a
use
residential,
or the
right.
office use, yeah, right.
But in this case, we have the two things to consider, one being it's technically a legally separate parcel, but it's going to look and act like a piece of the hotel. So we either look at it as a separate parcel, which has a 40% FAR maximum, or if it is considered a merged parcel, it would be at 28%, and then it would require an exception to go up to anything higher than that.
Correct.
But you're also saying that the hotel has the Aurora Grande affordable housing units, so that an exception to their limit was already granted.
No, the exception to go up to 40% applies only to the residential component. So the lodging use does not qualify for that same 40% FAR.
But the hotel was
Outright
given...
FAR.
The hotel got some FAR credit for the affordable housing piece. Yes or no? I thought you said that.
No, I think I may have misspoke.
Or I misheard you.
The hotel was granted higher FAR than typically permitted because it's in the PD district, and there were enough benefits of the development as proposed that it warranted that extra percent.
And one of those
to 1
being
or 2%.
25 affordable housing units
Yeah.
that were generated
Yes.
by the project.
Yes,
Okay.
you could say that.
So that was the conclusion, I guess, I drew.
Yes, yes.
Whether you said it or not. And just one last thing about the fencing, I was a little unclear on, you talked about it being pulled back from the property line, and it was a little bit unclear in this south elevation. So you're saying that if we're looking at the south elevation, the middle graphic here, we're looking at that fence but not seeing, then the very bottom gray we could consider as the retaining wall?
Oh, no, the bottom illustration is the building elevations only.
No, I mean,
The top-
I'm talking about the middle graphic.
The middle one
At-
shows the fences.
At the bottom, underneath the fence, where the text is,
No, that's a little misleading because it could look like a retaining wall, but in this case, the case of this application, the concrete block wall and the fencing both also represent the retaining wall. So rather than being constructed of two separate elements that might make it appear shorter, it's one solid element of 9 feet. What you see there at that corner is 9 feet.
so there's not a short retaining wall at the property line and then another fence at the lodging part.
Right. The way it's been represented is that it will be constructed all out of a single material.
Okay, then I just, when we get to the applicant in the presentation, I'll just look at the site photos again and see if that's just raised dirt. I was thinking there was already a concrete component to that, but, okay.
Well, I'll take you to this photo. This shows the retaining wall that, that is essentially there.
So the fence is built on top of the retaining wall. There is no setback on the fence. The additional setback is on the proposed villa, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
The proposed setback is for building elevations, but the proposed fencing would be different from this illustration here in that it would sit right atop that wall, although it would be constructed different, so it'll have a different appearance.
So the depth of this is what was confusing to me, that if you look in the bottom right corner, one could look at that three-dimensionally and see depth to that wall, and then the landscaping that's to the left of the wall is the same grade as the landscaping outside the wall?
No,
but it's
that's
not. It's
raised
raised
3
up.
feet. Mhm.
Okay, so that's what was confusing me. Got it. So that's all at the top of the retaining wall? Okay. That was the right image to show me to get me cleared up on that. Okay, so I will, yes.
One clarification. The fence on the south side on the neighbor's property does not have lattice on the top. It's raised from the bottom with sideway board, and then the rest of the boards are 6 feet tall.
So it's a solid 7,
It's at least 7 feet.
And they're also slightly below the path, too, so they needed that
So
extra
just to-
height.
I know there was a concern about noise, light, et cetera, when the hotel was originally built, and there was an adjustment made to that fence that was mitigating that issue for the residents, so.
Correct.
Right.
Okay.
And I
I
was,
just wanted
there
to
may
clarify
be, in all fairness, because we were trying to allow the property owners to, on the south side, to retain a 6-foot true elevation, the way that was built, there may be some variation because the bottom ledgers are between 1 foot and 2, so there may be some portions that are technically closer
Yeah,
to.
and I don't need to get caught up in the numbers, I just wanted to get caught up in the mitigation of noise and light from this use, and so I'm satisfied with that for now. I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing and first start with recognition of some emails that were received, one by Eric Knight, one by Holly Hanson and Jim Massey, and one by Kathy Ellick. They're all in the record for anyone that would like to review them. I believe the very last one from Ms. Ellick was just received moments before the meeting, so it may not have, there is a copy, I think, a hard copy in the binder, but it certainly will be part of the record of this public hearing. So with that, we would typically invite the applicant to come forward first and give us your pitch. Welcome back, Mr. Bartisono.
Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Steve Bartisono. My wife and I, Pat, live at this 43 Landy Way here in Yountville. I just want to, kind of reiterate, I don't mean to beat that to death, but reiterate a few of the things that Sandra pointed out to you about how we got to where we are. This lot, the so-called 10,000 square foot lot, was subdivided when we made the original subdivision. Purpose of doing that was so Pat and I could come back to Yountville, which we intended to do and did do, and replace the house that we lost in the construction of the resort on this lot. We got back, and as we began to go through that process, time passed, we got a little older, costs were enormous, and we simply decided not to do that. We didn't think it was a very good idea for us. Not only decided we wouldn't, but decided we couldn't. So we had this great lot at the back of the property and wondered, what can we do with it? Spoke to Jim Treadway, who was the GM at the time. He says, one of the things that this hotel needs is what you're looking at tonight. And he mentioned the absence of that sort of facility around the county and how it would complement what they're already doing over there. So we began to move in that direction. By this time, we had had our house approved by you all. So we had the site, we had a footprint for a building, and we had to, in order to get anything on that property other than a residential building, we had to come in and get our development agreement amended, which we did. And that was the amendment, I don't know what year it was, probably 11 or 12. And we got it amended, and the conditions were 2 rooms, and also we had to amend the use permit for the hotel to incorporate the use on this property into that use permit. Isn't that right? Yeah. So, I mean, everybody was okay with that. The problem was that our tenant decided they wanted to sell their property, and the whole process just kind of melted. And we said, well, you know, we're certainly not going to build it and what have you, so, and we can't amend their use permit without them on board. So we sat on it for a while, and they finally sold the property to, or the buildings and the lease to Ashford Inc. From Dallas. And I've got a couple of folks here tonight, one from Ashford, one that's associated with the architectural firm. And the minute that the Ashford people saw the property and saw this opportunity, they were excited early on. And so we've been talking about this for quite some time, and time has passed, the thing's wrapped up now, and they have done a lot of work to try and get where they are in a project that they think will work for them and hopefully work for the town. So I want to introduce the people and have them explain to you what they've done and what they're really asking for. I've got with us tonight is Bobby Nandipati. I think it's Potty, Nandi Potty. I always have trouble with that. Anyway, Bobby's with Ashford Inc., and he's their staff counsel. And also Pat Kruger. Pat Kruger is with the architectural firm that designed that hotel. I don't know if you all remember his partner, which was Ron Mitchell. So I'm gonna have Bobby come up and share with you some information about Ashford and what they want to try to do back there, and then he'll see what help he needs from Pat. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll stick around. If there's something you need from me, just ask, please.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Don't forget that stick. I know you hate the cane, but you got to take it with you.
Thank you, Steve. Mayor, council members, I want to thank you for taking the time to consider our application. I don't know if you have any history of Ashford, so I thought I'd give you just a brief summary of Ashford. My name is Bobby Nandipati. It's the potty, not Patty. I represent Ashford. Ashford is actually a group of companies. It's in fact 3 publicly traded companies. Between the 3 companies, we own and asset manage approximately 140 hotels throughout the country. We pride ourselves on being one of the largest and preeminent hotel ownership companies in the industry. We have a lot of expertise that we like to bring and share with communities and our hotel investments. Ashford Hospitality Prime, Inc. is one of those companies and happens to be the parent entity that owns the improvements and the ground lease here. That entity is a real estate investment trust that focuses on high revenue and luxury projects. The Bardessono project for us represents the crown jewel in the Ashford portfolio. It is very important to us. It's an iconic asset, and we're very proud of it. I want to take the time now to applaud you and the town for their foresight in approving such a development. The project has been a resounding success in numerous ways, aesthetically, architecturally, from an energy efficiency standpoint, and then its preeminence as one of the best hotels in the entire country is just phenomenal. So we're very proud of this project, and we're hoping that we can emulate or duplicate what was done there before and add yet another feather in the cap of Yountville. what we want to do, we're very excited about the project. We think that it will cement Yountville as the preeminent place for high-end luxury amenities within the Napa market, and that's what we want to do. We want to continue to promote Yountville, promote the Bardessono, and show that this is the place to come. When we initially bought this hotel about a year ago, we were very interested in the development opportunities, as Steve mentioned. We spent a lot of time visiting with and hiring consultants. We hired architectural firms, market analysts to determine what would be the best use of the property. We learned a lot of interesting facts during that process. One is that there's only one room in Yountville that's greater than 1,000 square feet. There are only 8 hotels in all of Napa that offer a luxury presidential villa in excess of 1,000 square feet. While we were doing this analysis, we also talked with the prior owners, the consultants, and even Pat and Steve, and determined that there was a lot of pent-up demand for this high-end luxury product. As Steve mentioned, the prior general manager had received requests for product or for presidential rooms, and he just didn't have it. We think this is a great opportunity to bring in an ultra high-end guest to Yountville who's seeking an exclusive and secluded getaway. I think this use would be compatible with not only the hotel with Yountville, but also beneficial for the residents if you compare it to other commercial type uses. We think this would be a win-win opportunity. It would, for the town of Yountville, it would increase the tax base, increase tax dollars that are coming in. It would bring in high-end guests who spend money and would keep the economy vibrant. And it would bring in certain types of clientele, movers and shakers, that can only result in positive things for the town of Yountville. In addition, based on some of the conditions that we've discussed with Sandra and implemented into the ordinances, we'd be able to improve some of the amenities for the community residents along the pathway. We've talked about adding bollard lights. I know that there is some discussion here about the fencing, so we had added trellises and some greenery, and we've always been forthcoming with our willingness to add more shrubbery, more greenery along the pathway, or anything else to help kind of soften the impact or the effect of a development on that corner. Ultimately, what we want to do is maximize the use of this land while minimizing the impact to the neighbors. And I think what we've put together here is an ideal solution. I know that there were a lot of concerns that Sandra raised, and we've talked about a lot of them, and I know that I've read the letters as well, and I wanted to address some of those concerns. With respect to size, I would like to point out, as we've mentioned a couple of times here already, that the site has previously been approved for a 4,000 square foot building. All we're really looking to do is create a little bit more flexibility and go from 2 rooms to 3 rooms. In actuality, the villa will be smaller, the setbacks will be greater, and we think that development, those changes will have a dramatic impact on, or minimizing the impact that the hotel or the villa will have on the surrounding community. In addition, we think that, as we mentioned before, we anticipate selling this unit as a single unit more often than not. The flexibility, while allowing for 3 keys, I don't think will be the maximum use for it. And as a result, I think that this space will be used significantly less than the rest of the hotel, and even more so than a single-family residence that would have been occupied 100% of the time. So I think the overall impact of this project would be minimal. The one thing I do want to point out is that we have spent a lot of time trying to design the right type of amenity that will attract the type of user that we want. And it's critical for us to maintain the size and flexibility as we have proposed in order to meet the demand and generate the occupancy required to make this development a success. With respect to noise, I'd like to mention that Nancy Sherman's here. She's the general manager of the property. We take all of these concerns very seriously, in particular the noise issues. I'd like to notify or let you guys know about the fact that we've got Remington Lodging and Hospitality engaged as the management company for the hotel. They're one of the preeminent managers in the country in terms of hotels. They've worked effectively with other cities and stakeholders to improve relationships with both the community and with the towns. I was recently at a council hearing in Sugar Land, Texas, which is a suburb of Houston, where we have a very large Marriott. And right after that meeting, I learned from the mayor that the management company was receiving a proclamation as a result of their helping the community. And I expect no less here. So while I know that there are a lot of concerns, we have agreed and we will agree to work with both the town, the staff, and the citizens to implement appropriate policies and procedures and any other solutions that may address concerns relative to noise. With respect to parking, Sandra was kind enough to send us a sample policy that was adopted by another user in town, and we saw that last week, and I believe we'll be able to adopt something very similar. While we are a large employer, at any one point in time, we don't have a ton of employees on site, and I believe we'll be able to accommodate the majority of them on site and come up with the plan to identify those locations that the town wants us to, the other employees, the overflow employees, to park. So I think we'll be able to solve that. We do have some concerns with respect to how the policy is enforced and how we work through that with the high turnover that we have, but I'm confident that we'll be able to work with Sandra and the staff on resolving those. Having said all that, there are two components that Sandra mentioned that I would like to talk about and make requests for modification. One of them is item number 3 in the planning section of Ordinance 16-3374. That last sentence requires us to direct our employees to silence their car alarms. I request this be stricken for 2 reasons. One is that item number 8 already requires us to implement policies and procedures to minimize operational noise, which we are happy to do. And I think there were some policies that were in place previous to our acquisition that we could probably reestablish and re-implement. My concern with having that in the development agreement is I, out of just curiosity, went to look at the manual for my car, and I was unable to. I'm unable to disengage the alarm system without going to the dealer, and I don't know that our employees will be able to do that. And again, with the higher turnover, I don't know if that's something that we can accomplish, but I know that there are other things that we can do to resolve that situation. So again, we're more than willing to work with the town and implement appropriate policies to address that. The second issue that I would like to discuss are the outdoor courtyards and the TVs and amplified sound. We have no interest or desire in putting outdoor speakers or amplified sound in the courtyards, but we would like to have TVs in the courtyards. We believe that's an amenity that the guests that we want to have will want. And I think there are a number of opportunities to resolve those issues. One is I think there are technological solutions that can limit how loud the TVs can go, and we can certainly look into those. And 2, I think we'll be able to address noise complaints similar to the way hotels throughout the country address noise complaints. I mean, it's not uncommon for hotel staff to have to go to a guest room and tell the guests to keep the noise down. And I believe we can implement maybe a hotline or some other policy or procedure to help address that. So I'd request that we at least be allowed to wire the TVs and come up with a subsequent policy. With those few modifications, I think we're fully on board with all the other conditions that staff has recommended, and I believe we'll have a top-notch facility here. And I wanted to take a little bit of time and turn it over to the architect so he could give you a little bit more flavor of how great this project will be and how ideal it would be for kind of the community, or how it will blend in with the community a little bit better. So, Patrick.
Thank you. No, I just said thank you. No question yet.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor and Council. So yes, I am part of the original design team for this project, along with my colleague Ron Mitchell, whom some of you may have met. We're based out of Seattle. We used to work for a firm, WATG, which is on the original drawings. We're now with MG2, but it's still the same team. I have to say Sandra did a beautiful job of going through the slides, so I may ask for a little bit of help. My goal today is to just talk a little bit about the design and assure you that the design care that was taken. Should I wait?
Sorry,
It's okay.
we were just getting a noise issue
There we
taken
go.
care of.
Good.
Now we're good.
All right. So I just wanted to take the next few minutes and assure you that the design that is proposed here is the care and thought is the same of the original project. This is an incredibly special project to us, and we don't always have the luxury of saying that for everything we do, but it is. It's in a beautiful part of the country and a beautiful project, and we're very proud of it and would like to continue that. Obviously, we're very fortunate that Bobby and his team have reached out to us to continue this process. So I will cover some of the very similar items that Sandra did initially, but before we look at the elevations, if we could look at the plan, I think it might, toward the front of the deck. I think it's worth noting that beyond some of the southeast corner and the height of the fence and such, I think there's opportunities, obviously having walked the site previously and having walked it again today, to improve that overall experience, not just for the inn, but for the residents. And some of that is then reflected in what we intend to do with the wall and the fences and the planting. Sandra, I think, touched on perhaps the articulation of that further to enhance that. So I think there's plenty of opportunity there. I think Bobby also mentioned the opportunity to add some lighting there that I think would be a great amenity. Again, not just for the inn, but for the residents who use that path. It's a wonderful place. It's interesting because we look at the fence, but in reality, when we look at the massing, as has been said, the massing of the building has not changed from the original design, other than been reduced by about 150 square feet, roughly. It is still the same footprint for all intents and purposes. The height is still within the allowable, but when you look at it in plan, you see that the articulation of the building itself is not pressed up against the property line. So the courtyards create a great relief from that massing, both on the west end and then center, and then in the southeast corner. When we look at the south elevation, which I think tells the best story overall, Sandra, if I could ask you. Perfect, thank you. As was mentioned, our intent is to use the same materials both in the building and the fence that are already on site. They obviously complement the region very well and work nicely with the stained cedar, the metal trellises, the block. We're introducing some planting there to break up that elevation and create some interest along the way. And as was mentioned, I think there's plenty of opportunity to improve that even further. As you saw, Mayor, the elevation number 1 does not reflect the wall. It is so it would taper down there, and but still we would be able to achieve some wonderful things there with that. There was a lot of discussion around whether this from a 2 to 3 unit to 3 bedrooms, and the amount of noise. And just from our experience, having done hotels and luxury hotels literally around the world, this is the type of guest that is generally not the louder guest. This is a presidential villa, which is usually rented out, what we would consider a presidential villa in the industry, usually rented out to a high net worth individual or a family who's renting the entire thing out as one. Perhaps they have a nanny in one room, their kids in another, and themselves. Generally, and again, this is ultra luxury, so the idea of concerns from noise and disturbances and rowdy parties, I think, are probably at a minimum for a property like this versus some of the other properties we look at. And again, I think that when you originally approved the footprint, it pulled back from the residential that surrounds it nicely, and it gave it good relief to that. And I think it would be a great addition and a great opportunity, frankly, to add to that path that is so beautiful right at the beginning as you lead back to the bridge, I think is a wonderful opportunity to put this all together and make it complete the project. So unless there are questions of the architecture, I'm going to...
Any specific questions at this point?
I have one, and
Yes.
that is it possible that you could take those walls on the south-facing area and move them back from the top of that retaining wall? Because that really does, I think, look onerous. Could you do that and then add some of the greenery at that point?
It's certainly something we can look at. Our goal was to kind of maximize the courtyards for this type of guest.
I realize that.
And we also thought simultaneously kind of having a higher fence would separate the kind of the living space from the rest of the neighborhood.
Maybe, sorry to interrupt you, but could you call up, Senator, that elevation that helped that one? Thank you, because that's kind of what we're talking about.
Right. What we had also discussed when Patrick and I were walking in is kind of more of the feel along the pathway, and we thought that there might be some opportunities for us to do more with the overall pathway, planning around that or doing more with that to kind of soften the effect as opposed to moving the fencing around.
Okay, I think, was there any additional answer to that question?
I think there's always opportunity for improvement without, going, this is a different solution than perhaps. But there's always an opportunity to improve on that experience. So I think to answer your question honestly, yes, I think we could do something that meets Remington's needs and also addresses your concerns of a 9-foot fence there. And I can think of things, but I haven't had a chance to discuss them.
Also, I have a question about the what kind of tech solutions could you come up with for noise, as far as having televisions outside? And I hate to say it, but I have heard many horror stories in the press about high net worth individuals who carry on terribly, and I really do not want to invite that in our community. So what kind of high-tech solutions would you have to protect the neighbors who are right behind you, just across that little gully, from the noise?
So I guess with respect to the televisions, I think there are solutions that prevent the TVs from going over a certain volume amount. I honestly am not well versed in the technology, but I am certainly. Thank you.
Well, and if I
Nancy,
may,
sorry, we can't have you speak from the audience. When they're finished, if you want to add to something, that's fine.
Sorry, I'll jump in. There is definitely technology out there that will regulate the volume of televisions. I should get one for my son, but that's a different story. But there's definitely that. And then you have two other things working to your advantage. Correct me if I'm wrong. The grade here is higher than the neighbors to the south.
Just a little bit.
Just a tiny bit, a couple feet, call it. But even to that extent, it doesn't give you the opportunity to get louder. It shouldn't encourage it. But it is to your benefit. I think if it were reversed, there would be a greater concern if the inn itself were lower than those residences, because the noise would tend to carry over that fence. But I think there's plenty of ways to mitigate that, and the technology is certainly out there.
I'd really like to hear about it.
Sure, and I think we could follow up with that.
Okay, thank you.
I don't have any questions at this point. Councilmember Durham?
I have questions of Bobby, if possible.
Okay, great.
Can you speak to projections of ADR occupancy and of last year's ADR occupancy and what's expected for the suite?
I can.
You weren't sure you were going to get to use all that when you brought it all the way from Dallas, were you?
I didn't, but I'm glad that I can pull it out now since I had to lug it all the way here. But of course, now that I'm pressed, I'm probably not going to be able to find it quickly.
We have the opportunity to invite other public comment, and then you could always come back up and show it if you find it, so.
That'd be great if you, do you have other questions and I can look for that? In the,
No.
Let's just plan on calling you back in a moment. I know we have Ms. Sherman here also that may have some comments. We'll just invite you back up, and we'll let you find your information. Yeah.
I just want to say, as
Please, if you could just identify yourself.
well,
for
I'm
the
Nancy
record.
Sherman. I'm the general manager. I'm privileged to be the general manager of Bardessono. And what I'd like to say is we have provisions right now that prevent people from partying and prevent noise levels, and for the integrity of the neighborhood, for the integrity of the guests that we have, the caliber of guests that we have security on at night. We have very little issue right now, and when we do, we quell it quite satisfactorily. So those provisions would be at the time of the reservation being made, and so I don't think that would be an issue at all. I completely understand what you're saying, but I don't think we're selling this to that individual. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Any others? I see that I'm going to go with. I think I'm going to go with Bobby to not ruin Mr. Natty Potty's last name. That's pretty close, I think. If any other members of the public would like to comment now, and please come forward. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm Pat Alexander at 6527 Heather Street, and I am that faceless, unknown, grayed out area that is on that southeast corner. And I can't tell you, well, Sandra, first of all, I want to say that the developers should thank you for the great job that you've done, and the rest of the staff, in making sure that this development can go through. I'm extremely disappointed with our entire staff, and I have faith in the town of Yountville, but I am so disappointed at the characterization that you've put forward and the amount of hard work, and I can only hope that we haven't paid your salary to build
Ms.
a
Alexander,
case
if you'd
for
like
this.
to address the council, you can do that. You're
Pardon
not
me.
here to address the staff.
Pardon me, please excuse
And
me.
there is a level of decorum that we'd like you to uphold.
Please excuse me. My house is there, and I'm absolutely shocked, and I feel like I'm going to faint. So I hope my husband can back me up and help me if I lose it here. May I inquire, Mr. Dunbar, are these the voting members of the board who'll be able to, or party of the council who'll be able to make a decision on tonight's?
This is the council that's hearing this item, yes.
Great, okay. So I'd like to begin by saying, please excuse me for my rudeness, Sandra. I hope I didn't offend you. Please excuse me. I've been working closely with Eric Knight, who has supported this development. I personally don't support it myself, but he was helpful enough to help me understand a few things that we need to pay attention to. Number one, this development is a separate parcel. It's not actually part of the Bardessono Inn, and that we haven't really figured out the FAR restrictions or anything at this point. The permit was never actually put forward, so as I understand it, you're deciding that tonight. So I would ask that we don't call this a done deal until we've looked at these pieces. Excuse me. I'm sorry to get off to that point. Please excuse my outburst. Staff and members of the council, I respectfully request that you reconsider the staff recommendation that the amendment go through, and that you allow the Lot 3 to have 3 parcels instead of 2. I would even ask that you reconsider going back to the residential, and even if it is the higher FAR, there's a huge difference between having a buffer zone residential piece. Sandra, I know that as part of your recommendation for staff, it was the fact that if it's higher density, well, that's okay. The rest of the property was also higher density. It seemed to work okay. And within the compounds of the overall look of the Bardessono Inn, I can understand that a higher density would work. But this is a buffer zone. This is a vital, vital community buffer zone between a commercial and residential property. And it's incredibly important. We're looking 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years down the road where we have to pay attention to the respect of that buffer zone. So with respect to the noise mitigation, I I don't know how many times I've had to call the Bardessono Inn on the Wednesday nights to complain about noise. I don't know how many times I've complained about the cars going off, that every time it, and those happen all throughout the night as the different shift people go through. I don't know that the Bardessono Inn actually presented those noise complaints to the town because they handled them themselves. It would happen very late at night and the town was closed, so that when me and many of my neighbors called to complain about the noise that was being broadcast because of the guests, the loudness, the noise, the Bardessono Inn assured us that they would take care of it. After an hour and a half later, it's true, the noise did mitigate, but it was completely unacceptable. So one of the reasons is that I'm saying that this is not going to work is that it is not keeping with the general amendment plan that says we have a duty to make sure that our architecture is part of the rural character of the town of Yountville. This particular design, the density, especially that southeast corner, is very dense, very high, and it's not at all keeping with the characteristic of our rural town of Yountville. Secondly, there's a huge water restriction going on right now. If you're going to approve to go from a two-person, first of all, I'd like to revisit the fact that it may be residential, but if we're going to be going from a occupancy to a 3, let's look at the amount of water that's going to be used. We are forbidden from using water in this town because we've got a very severe drought going on. With the addition and the enlargement of that to make it a 3-unit, you're going to have more washing for the clothes, for the towels. You're going to have more people washing their hands, using the restroom. You're going to have more pools. You're going to have so much more water usage, and it's irresponsible for us to consider this, the expansion of that. Second of all, we're looking at the resources. With more hotel rooms, there's going to be more people. There's going to be more employees. There's going to be more cars. There's going to be more vacuums. Do you know how many people from the Bardessono Inn park over on Heather Street and park over on Heritage Court? Because there's not enough adequate parking. So all the time, there are always people running, because they're running at the last minute from Heather Street down the road, or down the path as quickly as possible, running to work. Thirdly, the resources for our natural environment. Hopper Creek is a riparian corridor. It actually connects the south part of Yountville all the way to the north part. Birds fly overhead. There are owls. There are animals. When we increase the density and when we raise up that, we are lessening the natural resources that are available to our furry and feathered friends. We're looking at rain-off. When we decide to pave Paradise and literally carve up every single square inch, then we are destroying the natural runoff that can be absorbed by the land. We want to pay attention to that. Oh gosh, I'm so sorry, there are so many things. I feel like I got off to a wrong part, so please excuse me.
We do have a 5-minute limit for public comment.
Okay, so esteemed council, I would ask that part of your job or part of your role and part of your service to the community is that you are a voted entity. And to make staff recommendations, I would ask that you please, it wasn't the residents of staying at the Bardessono Inn who voted you in. We voted you in, and we are the heart of Yountville. We're the heart of this community. Mr. Bardessono is the heart of this community because he's got more legacy here than any of us. So I would say, why not take some of that larger area? Why not turn it into a memorial park? Why not have a legacy that goes forward 10, 20, 30, 100 years into the future that will bear your name? I would ask, please do not accept the staff recommendation. Please consider your neighbors. And again, please excuse me, Sandra, I didn't mean to be rude or offensive, and I apologize. And Mayor Dunbar, I apologize too, and I ask and I implore you, please think about the neighbors who live here. Thank you.
Anyone else before I invite back up? Okay. And Mr. Nantipati, are you prepared with your information?
Yes.
Okay, so once we get some other public comment, I'll invite you back up.
Hello, I'm Megan Mason. I reside at 5 Heritage Court. like many of my neighbors, my husband and I have lived through the entire process and the construction of the Bardessono Inn, and been always present and never quite understood how some of the variances and amendments have happened, but I know that such inn has brought a lot of TOT to the city, so there's reason for some of that, but I'm asking today, at what expense do we want to continue to amend for the residents' reasons too. I do not support the Amendment 3, 455. Well, I realize that there's nothing I can do about the construction of a single-family home as previously approved. I'm asking that you not amend, that you make it cap the villa to about 3,000 square feet, so it would be more in keeping with the size of the lot and proximity to the neighbors. With the addition of 3 suites, there comes many people, activity, and more parties. Currently, as an immediate neighbor to the inn, we are subjected to their regular pool parties and have had to call on that. Their second floor pool looks right into our master bedroom. We listen to the employee parking, the early morning garbage pickup deliveries, the parking of Arroyo Grande residents, and the employees using the area for their breaks, the staging of the workers who bring in and maintenance workers, and there's a lot of nice bright lights that look up in the parking lot towards us. In reading the section 1 part of it, in this new ordinance, it says the various uses in the project are integrated into the site through design and placement of structures, landscaping, and open space in such a way as to produce a harmonious combination of disparate uses. I have a hard time with this sentence where I disagree with it, and I don't see how this is harmoniously fitting in. You talk about the pathway as a beautiful pathway. Well, I look and see and walk on that pathway daily, and as neighbors and as the Bardessono Inn, that's not really very well maintained, I believe. The oak trees are neglected. There's a lot of dead oak, and if they truly want to make it a beautiful corner, I think this design needs more landscaping, less concrete, and more softening. That corridor is highly trafficked, not by residents only, but by these high visibility guests, and I would think that we would want to make a better presentation on that pathway as well. So I just ask you to please think about the residents and who live here and have put in a lot of our love and pay our taxes here, that you look at considering scaling this down and being watchful of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Nandipati, I'll invite you back up now, and still invite any other members of the public that would like to speak, but let's try to get some answers to Councilmember Durham's question. And if we can just repeat, Councilmember Durham, you were asking about the average daily room.
Well, I want to know about the ADR and occupancy for this specific villa, what you plan for it to be, and then what, if you have ADR and occupancy for what Bardessono was last year.
I've got
comparison.
Yes, I've got 2015 numbers for the way the hotel operates. It was at almost 79% occupancy, and we anticipate the villa to start at 61% and then stabilize at just under 70%. And then ADR is kind of a fluctuating estimate. Mm-hmm. In May we had it pegged at about $1,200. Mm-hmm. But the market's been shifting quite a bit in recent months.
So your projection for the villa is approximately 70% at a 1,200 ADR?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other factual information he has in his soft binder there?
No.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, if I may address two points?
Actually, before that, I want to make sure if any other members of the public, because there may be other questions that come up. If not, then I'll invite you back yet again. Any other members of the public that haven't already spoken would like to comment? I'm going to make him come all the way back up here after having just have him sat down. Yes, Mr. Natty Potty, please. We're going to really work you over tonight.
Well, I appreciate it. I need the exercise.
All right.
I've been sitting on a plane for quite some time.
Very good.
With respect to the FAR, Sandra had mentioned earlier that if it was considered one project, if we merged the legal descriptions, that then we would be more in line with a traditional FAR. And I'm not opposed to merging the legal estates. I don't know that that accomplishes anything differently from a kind of a perception standpoint, but that's certainly something that we're willing to do. And Councilwoman Dornbacher, I wasn't really fully prepared to discuss the fencing and other things, but I think Patrick has indicated that there are several options that we can look at. So I think that is something that we can evaluate a little bit more in depth and provide some solutions. But I think that's very workable. And with respect to concerns of the overall impact of the development, it's our estimation that we won't need additional employees to take care of the villa. So therefore, we don't think that there will be additional impact from that perspective. And everything else we've heard tonight, again, I think there are plenty of opportunities for us to work with Remington to identify solutions that we can implement.
And to clarify, you're requesting modifications to the staff proposal on the development, the amendment item 3. I want to just make sure that Sandra is clear on what and the council is clear on exactly what you're requesting, which language you'd like to see omitted, because I'm looking for the proper attachment.
It was in the ordinance.
Yeah, the resolution attachment.
It was in the item number 3 to the...
Under planning,
yep.
Number 3 on page 5 of 8 in our packet.
The last sentence?
Yeah, where you are asking that silence their car alarms be stricken. Then the other piece is on number 7 of that same page, to not prohibit the wiring for audio television outside.
That's correct.
Those were the 2 requests that you had made.
Correct.
Number 6 of 8?
7.
7 of 8.
It's on page 5 of 8 in our resolution, under planning.
Ah, thank you.
Yeah, so it's number 3, the very end, and number 7 here is what he is requesting. Councilmember Durham, you have that language clear?
I'll get it.
Okay.
I'll find it.
It's in the resolution,
So
attachment.
Thank you.
You're asking that all employees parking on site shall be directed to silence their car lock alarms should be out? Is that what you're asking?
Stricken from the development agreement. Again, because we can adopt policies and implement policies, which is, I think, number 8. So we're already obligated to do that, to implement policies. I just don't know that we can actually turn off the alarms. I think there's different things, maybe
Right.
like locking the car.
You're asking that it not be in a development agreement, that it can be covered in policies and procedures.
Exactly.
Within the employment.
Yes.
Okay. And you're clear what he's proposing?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Last chance for any member of the public who would like to comment on this. I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing then, and invite council consideration.
I'd like to ask a question, please. of the
Okay,
staff.
staff question, sure. Councilor Dornbecker?
Sandra, I'd like to find out, has there been any consideration given to the increase in water usage of 3 rooms and little swimming pools?
No, it hasn't been specifically analyzed because this project is exempt under CEQA as an infill project, so it doesn't trigger separate environmental review.
And there, just to follow that up, in case you were about to ask this question, there's already, even if the council didn't act on this amendment request, there's already an approval that's in place for either lodging units or residential that would obviously have the ability to have water use in either of those cases. So it's not going from no use to a level of use that hasn't been previously approved.
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions of staff?
Oh, and then I just wanted to clarify what Mr. Nanipati said about if they did merge the property, that would restrict their farther to 28%. Is that correct?
Right. It would lower overall FAR to 28%.
But I'm not sure that he's actually in a position to speak on behalf of the property owner to even do that, so I don't think we should even...
I was just addressing what he brought up.
Understood. I just want to clarify that while it was an offer presented, I don't think it should be in our consideration that it's an offer that we can factor into our consideration at this point, to be honest.
I understand.
Any other questions of staff before we deliberate? Okay. So am I going to have to call on somebody to start? Councilmember Durham?
No, please.
I'd like to make a comment when I start. I've been here for 13 years. I pay taxes. I have employees sitting in front of my house setting their cars every night. I have lights, street lights shining in my house, and I just want to be absolutely clear that I'm a resident here just like everyone else. So some of the implications just frustrate me sometimes. So I just want to be clear on that. So I personally don't mind the massing of the building and the FAR, but I have issues. I stood on that wall yesterday, and I'm 6 feet, so that put me up at 9 feet, and a statement was made that the massing of the building is set back, but the building's not the issue. To me, it's the fencing that's on top of the walkway that's the issue. So I'd like to see something done with the fencing, whether it be set back to allow for some of the landscaping, like the picture that's shown. I'm not the designer, but I'd like to see something new done with the fencing so that people who are enjoying the path can enjoy it and don't feel like both sides are coming down on them. And yesterday when I was walking it, it appears there's some opportunity for landscaping on both sides of the pathway that would help mitigate noise and sight issues as well. I think the parking, I just want to reiterate that the management parking program, a statement was made that there was some concern because they have high turnover, but that's not the town's issue. The town's issue is that we have a consistent parking plan for everybody, so I just want to make sure we're clear on that. I have a hotel, which would kill to do any of these numbers, but we do not. But we do have TVs that are able to be set at a certain level so as to control the noise. So that's definitely something that can be done out there. Sorry, I'm looking over the rest of it.
If you have an opinion about the request to remove the car alarm restriction.
I agree that if they're in part of the parking management plan, which should integrate that into their whole policies, that they've been willing to, that they've shown that they'd be willing to do with that new parking plan, then I'm fine with that.
And you're not obligated to state your position at this point. You're certainly welcome to continue discussion. So if those are just your first remarks, that's fine.
Yeah, and then I think the whole Justin Bieber thing on TV is way overblown. I don't think those are the type of people we're going to get up here. And once again, I think that what is happening there is something that could fit into the spot and into Yountville just fine. So especially with my background and with my history, I've seen it. I've served people like that as well, and I understand what they're trying to a couple of comments were made. The architecture is part of the rural characteristic. I mean, that whole property, to me, is part of the rural characteristic of this town, and it's integrated in the designs that they're trying to do, and it's consistent with that. The noise mitigation, it appears to me, and that's why I asked the question earlier about the guests. The pool parties kept coming up. Those are locals. Those are not guests. The dive bars, the majority of people are locals. So I want to make that clear too. The residential versus hospitality, there's a balance of that in this town, and one helps to serve the other. And I believe we're all a fortunate part of that, and our benefit from that on a daily basis. So I think that's an important thing. I mean, a comment was made also about the parking of Arroyo Grande residents. That's a whole separate issue. If we need to discuss that, then that's something else. But we're just talking about the parking with the employees here. And one last thing, there's permeable surfaces at Bardessono that were a huge part of the of building it. So all this discussion about paving paradise, I understand, but a lot of that was dealt with when this property was built. So that's where I am at this point.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Dornbecker?
Thank you. Yes. Okay. So I do believe that the massing along that retaining wall, of having the fencing right there, is too much. That it should be set back and there should be greenery to soften that whole look, because just looking at it in the illustration, and I realized there were minimal amounts of greenery in the illustration, but still, just looking at it like that is just overwhelming, and I can't. I think that having the fence set back from that wall will make a visual difference, and having greenery between the fence and the retaining wall. I believe that they must participate in the parking plan and, have suitable parking either on the property itself or elsewhere. The TV sets must be set to, with a, whatever it is, to gauge the volume. I was wondering about, nobody talked about, and now the general manager has left, but I'd be interested in knowing what the hours of outdoor entertaining at that facility would be permitted. I think that it would be, fair to impose some sort of restriction on you can't party until 4 o'clock in the morning in your little swimming pool there. And when I've read some of the information that was sent to us, and it said, well, it would work just as well as a, beautiful residential use. But I believe in dealing with reality, and the reality is, who would buy? It makes sense for the Bardessonos to have lived on that property. That's their property, and they had their home there for many, many years, a beautiful home. I can understand them, but if that parcel were put on sale, who would buy a residential property that's part of an inn? And it doesn't even make sense to me. So I really do believe that this is a reasonable use for that corner. We did receive some information from residents who were in support of it, and I am in support of it too, because I think that that corner has bothered me. I use that path all the time when I'm out and walking, and I think that it will enhance it, but it's got to be mitigated. The size of it has got to be mitigated, and I can understand the need for the FAR being increased to 40%, but I would really prefer that there only be 2 suites in that. But I understand if a family came and they had a nanny, would they want the nanny to stay in the suite? So I'm open to negotiation on that, but I really feel like the visual, we're looking at the old visual. Let's look one more time at the visual. See? That really looks too impactful, too urban. And so I think that it would help a lot to move that fence back, give up a little bit of room in their little private gardens, and have it be more amenable to the residents of our town. That's how I feel.
Thank you. Before I invite further comment from Councilmember Durham. Now I'm getting Dornbecker and Durham confused.
Dunbar.
I want to commend Councilmember Durham for his initial comments, appreciating the perspective that we take as residents here. 18 and a half years for me. And also the care and consideration that we give all of our residents, all of our businesses. Not only being residents ourselves, but having a broad picture and scope and perspective on how things are integrated into our neighborhoods and our communities. That said, I remember when residents were promising that we were going to be flooding heritage estates because of the rain overflow and the fact that hotel development on this parcel was never going to work. That's never come to pass. Yes, there have been issues with some of the individual activities on the site, and those have been responded to, and if they have to continue to be responded to, they will be. Traffic impacts, it varies by neighborhood. We have this conversation almost every project, and it comes at us from different perspectives every time with different sets of facts. But that all goes into consideration. There's actually, in my opinion, very little for us to be actually evaluating tonight, to be perfectly honest. I know there are some residents that never wanted to see this hotel developed. They wanted none of this, and they're still advocating for none of it, or as little new of it as absolutely possible. To turn back prior approvals is completely inappropriate for us to even consider. I don't see a 150 square foot difference really having a significant change to what's already been approved. And so I can support the request for the amendments in general. I agree with both my fellow council members that mitigation still needs to be made with the fencing impact. I think you've heard it loud and clear that this should not be, and we're not going to accept it to become a tunnel. There are ways around it. You could lose some square footage on the outdoor entertainment areas to help preserve the proper protections in that corridor. I'm not as concerned. There's already been concern brought up about noise, but frankly, we're one neighbor away from having noise impacts in each and every one of our residences, to be honest. And what we do is we talk to our neighbors and we work together to come to agreements. We all have car alarms. We all have water use. We all impact natural resources. But we also all enjoy the beauty of this town, and that is our walking paths, that is our privacy, our quiet, our dark skies. But what that means to me is proper consideration for the impacts that any new activities, new uses, new development mean. It doesn't mean don't do anything ever again because something might change. Most of us wouldn't be here. I think maybe the Bartisonos and a couple others would be the only ones here if that was the mentality that because it was that way 50, 60 years ago, it should never change. And I just know that that's not realistic either. So I think we have done, and I've been on this council since 2004. I know that this project, the original concept started before that, but we took great care in making sure that a hotel in the middle of town that used to be vineyard that everyone enjoyed, even though it was your land. I think that was very fair and balanced in the way we ultimately allowed that to develop. It went from oh my gosh, what's this going to be, to it's a shining star in town. It's seen around the world as one of the finest properties anywhere, and we can be proud of how we all work together to make that happen. I see this as an appropriate and natural modification or addition that we've been expecting all along. Frankly, for years, we've been wondering, when are we going to develop that corner? Frankly, the dirt and weed corner is less attractive and appealing to me than what I'm seeing presented tonight with those minor modifications. I agree with Mr. Nandipati's recommendations for both mitigations not being appropriate in the development agreement or the development amendment. I see the car alarm nuisance and the outdoor noise concerns to be appropriate in a procedural document that the town staff will work with the management of the hotel to make sure that it's honored and it's appropriate. Certainly any guest that's going to be staying on this property and the management of the hotel is not going to want a visit from our sheriff's department when they're out of compliance with our regulations. So I'm prepared to act on this. Before I ask for any additional comments from the council, I just want to confirm with our attorney, because we are down one council member and we have one recused, that if we take any action at all tonight, that it would require all 3 votes in support of that action.
Yes, Mayor, that's correct.
Okay. So with that, any additional comments, Councilmember Durham?
Just one thought. Is there a way to follow up 6 months or 8 months from now with the applicant? Oh, not now. Once that's built, to follow up to ensure that that noise is being properly maintained?
Yeah, and I would turn to both Sandra and Gary if necessary on, even more important to me, since all 3 of us spoke to the concern about the fence and setting that back, how you would best recommend, if we are going to move forward with action, how we address that. And then as it goes to the 2 issues in the planning section, items 3 and 7, how would you recommend or request, if we're going to do that, how would you do that?
Okay. As to the fence, I think that's important enough to send it back to the ZDRB. It can get them started on this project, but the ZDRB, or we could bring it back to you to look at the design issue of the where they're locating that fence and whether there's sufficient separation and softening with landscaping. As to 3 and 7, I'm okay removing those with the expectation that they are integrated into a policy and we work with them. That'll be something we work with them as part of the use permit monitoring program, and is why there's not a 6-month review in here, because we're just naturally working really closely with all of our businesses. Okay. So I think it's addressed.
So I would just stress then in that same policy manual that review is done for any of the other issues that have come up in terms of light or noise complaints from neighbors. Because I know that in many cases, if not all of them, they have been temporary and mitigated, but if they're recurring, that's also a concern. And we want to make sure that there's no pattern of behavior that is allowed to continue if it's inappropriate. What I would, just to counter that, and again, maybe this comes back to our attorney for recommendation on this, I would be comfortable with not going back to ZDRB if there's a way that we can have language in here about the fence setback issue needs to be mitigated. I don't know if to what degree, that's the question. Do we try to set a setback number now? Do we approve potentially everything else with that one mitigating measure, keeping it from being implemented? How does this work now?
At this point, in order to approve it tonight, it should be included in some kind of language in here. And you might be able to speak to this better. Is there a particular provision that could be changed or easily modified to effectuate the setback that they're speaking about?
Well, we don't know exactly what the answer is. We've heard some ideas, so I would add a condition that the fence needs to be pulled off of the retaining wall. And that's why I say bring it back to council or ZDRB is a good idea, because we can see what they're proposing and we get feedback from the decision makers. That's not a decision I think is appropriate at staff level, even though we
Agreed.
hear your concerns.
So you can have it as a condition that approval be required by either the ZDRB and/or the council
Yeah.
for whatever the applicant wants to bring back as a modification to that
To the fencing.
condition.
Mhm.
Yes, that would be appropriate.
And you're okay with
Yeah.
whatever that language, if it's
Yes.
what I just said or if it's what you
Yes.
just said? Okay. So additional comments, consideration by
Well,
council?
we also be adding that we require that the televisions have a noise control. Is that appropriate that we add that to the,
That too.
Well-
We could add the noise regulation on the televisions.
What I'm hearing is, and what I'm proposing is that that condition be put into a policy manual, not the development amendment.
I see.
That staff is hearing loud and clear, as is the applicant, that
Okay.
we want the exterior noise controlled and we want the impacts of employee parking to be as controlled as possible. I don't know that it's required that it's in this document, but it is required that staff be able to follow up and monitor that, and that the management understands what they have to
Okay.
comply to.
Yeah.
So
We got
if that
that.
can be satisfied in a policy document, then I think that's maybe in a more appropriate location. Does that satisfy you?
Yeah,
you-
it makes perfect sense,
also-
especially since they both got up, both Bobby and the GM got up and said that's something that's available. So.
And you're
they-
okay with that too?
Yeah.
I'm talking to Gary now.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
Yes, yes, I mean, that's a permissible condition to put in there. In terms of enforcing a level of sound, that might make it difficult because the town will not have the authority to enforce the policy level.
Well, we have our noise ordinance in place though, and if it's violated, then we certainly can enforce that.
That is true.
Yeah. Okay. So additional discussion? Councilmember Dornbecker?
well, I'm, if someone can help me with the resolution, because I don't know quite how to,
Well, before you do that, I want to make sure Councilmember Durham has
Just one
time to
quick
follow
note.
up on it.
Yeah, I just want to say, because a comment was made by the public about the facts and findings and the staff report, and I want to be clear that all of my decisions are based on those facts and findings as they are written and moving forward, so.
and as are mine. I agree with the findings. And with the exception of the fence, I'm happy to make, so which ordinance do I do first? 16-455?
Yeah.
Development agreement,
Okay.
introducing and waiving the reading of the ordinance.
Okay. So I make a motion that we introduce and waive the reading of ordinance number 16-455, approving amendment number 3 to the Bardessono Project Development Agreement, approved by ordinance 337-07. First Amendment approved by ordinance number 368-06, and Second Amendment approved by ordinance number 403-12.
Do we need to make it clear in the motion with the,
That's not
maybe I'll
in this
talk,
one,
Yeah, I believe it's item 3 and item 7.
but that's not in this
No,
ordinance.
That's in the
That's the
resolution.
next one.
I was just going to talk, okay, never mind. So we're okay with that as stated?
So I'll second it.
All in favor? Aye. That passes with a 3-0 vote.
Okay,
And
now I
then-
have to get to the resolution itself.
Yes. If you'd like to.
I can,
Over here.
I can make a motion to approve master development plan amendment, including use permit amendment and design review amendment for Bardessono Hotel at 6526 Yon Street to add a 3-suite lodging unit on the former single-family residential parcel, APNs 036-090-029 and APN 036-090-031, with the exception of number 7 and 8.
Actually,
I believe it's 3 and
the sentence out of item 3 and items 7 in the planning section of the.
Thank you. So removing the sentence in 3 and items 7 and 8.
Is that clear enough, Gary or Steve?
7. No, item 8 is not included.
7,
That's-
not 8.
It's only
3 and 7.
3 and 7.
modifying 3 and 7.
Modifying 3 and 7. Thank you.
And adding the requirement for
Oh.
the fence setback.
Yeah, so I think, Sandra, you have the language already for the requirement for modification of the fence setback to be approved by the ZDRB. Does the council feel it appropriate to come back to us or the ZDRB? It's your motion, so you can.
I'm fine with it going back to the ZDRB.
Okay.
I am too.
So that's in
Yes,
your motion
yes,
that it
that's-
be approved by the
yes.
ZDRB at a future date. You didn't read the resolution number. Just want to make sure
Thank
that's
you.
in the record.
Thank you. Resolution number 16-3374.
So is staff and council clear and fine with that?
Yes.
Is there a second?
Yes, I will second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
That is a unanimous 3-0 approval as well. So congratulations to all of the interested parties in the room. Thank you for the discussion tonight.
Well, no, he's got to do a staff report.
And let's see, how is council doing? Need a comfort break, or can we
I was going to
power
call
through?
Hurley's for the vice mayor, but apparently she's here. Thank you.
Yeah. If we can go ahead and move on, we will. So let's do that. Welcome back.
Thank you.
I think we're probably going to lose most, if not all, of our audience right now, but that's okay. If you could do it quietly so we can go ahead and move on to our next item, which is item 10A, tree removal application.
Wonderful.
And let's see, who do we have? Nathan.
Yes.
This is you.
All right, thank you, Mayor and Council. Before you tonight is a resolution to authorize the removal of one 30 to 36 inch diameter coast live oak located at 2940 Lincoln Avenue. The resident at 2940 Lincoln Avenue, along with A Plus Tree Service, submitted an application for the removal of this tree. The house is located just at the end of a flag lot near the end of Grant Lane, and it shares a fence line with the cemetery. The application included an arborist report, which is also included in the staff report, which you have all received. One statement from the arborist report reads as follows. Also, if we can put up on the TV screen, there's photos from the arborist report. So that is a photo of the tree in question taken from the cemetery. And then on the other slide are more close-up images of the current status of the tree. Says the oak has a co-dominant stem with a DBH of 30 to 36 inches. Lead A has a stem diameter of 22 inches and lead B has a diameter of 21 inches. Several large limbs have failed in the past and have fallen on the homeowner's roof. Other limb failures have fallen on the property owned by the cemetery. The trunk grows towards the fence, has a 10 to 15 degree lean, and now is resting on the fence. The tree is showing signs of decline with dieback throughout the canopy. Currently, there are only 15 to 20% live canopy. The bark is falling away from the trunk stem, and the area around the trunks are showing signs of sudden oak death. There are dark colorations on and in the bark, as shown on those photos. There are fungi spots on the trunk, too. In its current state, the tree has a health and structure rating of 2 on a scale of 1 to 5. The arborist report goes on to make the recommendation to remove the tree and to replant. The condition and state of the tree has declined to the point of no return. Again, this is the words of the arborist. With only a 15 to 20% live canopy, bark that is flaking off, the presence of fungi in and on the back, and the signs of sudden oak death, it, again, the words of the arborist, just doesn't make sense to attempt to save the tree. The tree is in such poor condition that climbing the tree is not recommended, and that a crane and aerial bucket should be used to remove the tree. Now, in staff's analysis, as required by Chapter 17.98 of the Yountville Municipal Code, it states that 6 different criteria should be considered whenever considering the removal of a significant tree. Because of the size of this oak tree, it is considered a protected tree, and therefore that's why it's before the town council this evening. This can't be decided on the staff level. This criteria that needs to be considered includes the condition of the tree with respect to its health, the imminent danger of falling or failure, the necessity to remove the tree to allow for the reasonable use and enjoyment or development of the property, the age and size of the tree with regard to the appropriateness and the size of the area in which the tree is planted, the effect of removal upon soil erosion and whether it will result in a significant diversion or increase in the flow of surface water, the number, species, size, and location of other trees in the area and the effect removal would have on those, as well as whether reasonable mitigation measures that reduce the structural defect in a hazardous tree to a less than significant level can be implemented. If after the discussion, the town council is of the opinion that the approval to approve this removal, replacement trees should be considered, and the Yountville Municipal Code states that the planning officer may condition any tree removal permit with replacement of trees in kind, and its staff's recommendation to go with what the applicant proposed, which would be to replace this one oak tree with 3 24-inch box English oak trees. And the 3 replacement trees, though usually we'd like to see all replacements occur on the same property, because they are removing one, it would most likely be inappropriate to put 3 new oak trees in the place of one. So it's anticipated that 1 oak tree would go back in this location and 2 others would be given somewhere in the community, most likely to the cemetery, which is located just right there. But that may be determined at a future date. Staff is of the opinion that removal of the tree is appropriate based on the arborist report, particularly the evidence of the sudden oak death and the fungi. Furthermore, with the 3 additional English oaks being located in that similar area, and also that there are already some oak trees located near this one, the removal is not visible from the right-of-way, and with the addition of the new oaks, the urban forest would still be protected and maintained. That is staff's opinion. We're here, of course, for any questions that the council may have after discussion.
Thank you very much. Questions about the report? Councilmember Durham.
There was, you said it was only visual and no soil test or anything else. Is that normal?
It depends, really. It's a case-by-case basis. Because the arborist was able to see simply from a visual of going out there and seeing the fungi and seeing the evidence of the sudden oak, soil testing wasn't deemed necessary.
Thank you. Yeah, Councilmember Dornbecker, any questions?
Well, so was there any testing done on the material around those black spots? I mean, was there no testing done other than visual?
The arborist report states that just a visual inspection was performed.
Also, it says that, in order to approve the removal of the tree, we should consider the following criteria. And as I read this, I don't know the answer to some of these. If the effect of removal upon the soil erosion, or whether it will result in a significant diversion or increase in the flow of surface water. Has anyone looked into that?
Staff's of the opinion that that wouldn't result in any serious difference in the flow of water. This criteria are meant to be talking points to consider rather than required findings.
Well, thank you.
Vice Mayor, questions?
Yeah, my question is, I'm trying to figure out how old is the property or when was the property built at 2940 Lincoln? Do you have any idea?
I can't tell you
10
offhand.
years, 50 years? Been there a long time.
It's been there a long time. I can't tell you offhand the
Okay.
exact time.
All right, thanks.
The applicant, I think, might know the answer.
Okay.
And we'll have you come up and answer that in just a moment. Thank you. Do you have more questions
Nope.
after that? Okay. I don't have any questions at this point, so I'll go ahead and as soon as our reporter gets her name and information, we'll continue the conversation. Nathan, if you could, in the interim, lower that microphone a little bit, I'm anticipating that would be appropriate. Yes. So yes, please come forward and share your story with us.
My story.
Your story, your situation with us.
My name is Madeline Ferguson, and I live at 2940 Lincoln Avenue. And the house was built in 1993. I purchased it in 2012. And I noticed a problem with the tree probably about a year or so after I purchased the property. I could see that it was leaning more and more, and it's knocked out a piece of my fence already. And it's also bent the cemetery's fence as well. And it just continues to go that way. And this has been going on for about 3 years. So, and last winter, huge mushrooms were growing off the base of that tree, and I was told, that's not healthy. That's definitely something wrong with the tree. And the only thing that's really holding those two sections together is that years ago, I don't know when, a bar was put across, connecting it to one side of the tree to the other. That's probably the only thing that's holding it up at this point. It has dropped branches, significant sized branches, in the cemetery. It is leaning already onto my garage, and my I have a shed out there, which is right close to the tree. And the other side leans over on my roof. So I'm very concerned about it coming down. And I don't feel safe. My house is like right there. So I don't really feel safe with that tree being there. The other thing I'd like to comment on is having to put in another oak tree. I have 7 oak trees right immediately around my property. And dealing with the mess of an oak tree, to add another one is, anyway, it's just too much. And I don't know why I have to put another oak in when I've got so many oaks around my house. So I'd like to put another tree in, I just don't want to put in an oak tree. And my other question was, according to the resolution, 3 trees have to be planted either on my property or in the community. Who's paying for those trees? Is that me? Does that cost fall on me?
We'll answer after you finish your comments, and I'll have staff answer for you.
Okay. So I do have a lot of concerns. I've been trying to get this tree down since June. And so now we're in October, and it's just slowly leaning, and I'm just waiting for it to fall. So that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, and I'll ask staff to answer your question about the cost and what the likely cost of replacement trees would be.
While the ultimate decision of that can be made by the town council, according to the tree ordinance, it's a typical requirement for any trees to be replaced on an inch-by-inch basis. And so for significant trees, of course, that would be unrealistic to replant one tree of the same size. And so that's why multiple trees, that their aggregate size would fulfill that requirement, which is why, and in the application, it was stated 3 trees. Staff believe that is appropriate. That's why it's stated in the resolution as such.
And the cost would be associated or handled by the resident, the applicant. And the location, you're proposing one of the 3 replace this as an oak. What is your position on the request that it be a non-oak species that replaces on property with other oaks placed elsewhere?
Well, again, that can be the decision of the council based off previous discussions and the overall purpose of the heritage tree ordinances and the tree protection ordinances, there has been specific attention given to oaks, and it's been the goal that for every oak taken out, there are oaks added to the forest. Of course, there's always the opportunity to require one tree be there. That could be something else, as long as some of the other trees given back to the community, at least some of them, include oaks. Those are definite possibilities that the council can discuss.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. Seeing no other members of the public to speak, I'll invite comment or other questions by the council. Anyone like to begin on this? Councilmember Durham, any initial thoughts?
I'm fine with the request of, as someone who has 4 oaks on his property, I understand, but I'm fine with the request of having a different tree that falls within the acceptable trees to be on the property, and then the other 2 can be the oaks then.
So you're promoting that 3 trees do replace it, 1 could be a non-oak on site,
property, on
and the other 2...
applicant's property, yep.
Okay. Councilmember Dornbecker, your thoughts?
Well, I have a few thoughts about that. This valley used to be deeply forested with oak trees, and that's why they are considered the heritage tree. And I have 3 oaks in my back garden, and I understand the acorns and the things that fall out of the oak tree. On the other hand, I have had my oaks examined by an arborist, and I understand that an oak that has gotten to the point where very low to the ground, and this one seems to be low to the ground as far as I can see, where it then developed 2 major trunks, is very dangerous. So I would feel a lot better if the arborist report were complete and there had been more tests done. But I think that I'm continuing to weigh my answer.
Okay, thank you. Vice Mayor, your comments?
All right, well, my comments, the reason I was asking about, and thank you for providing the information, how old the house is and how long you've lived there. So it looks like since a residence just went in there since 1993, this tree is probably pretty old. It looks like it was probably in some level of decay. I'm not an expert at all for a while, so and it looks like it's continued. And you just moved in 2012, so probably this happened, all this damage, well before that. So it's probably up to nature that caused this. But with all the other trees on your property, all I would strongly recommend is, you bought the property, they were there. I hope you want to be a very good steward of the other trees, because I do appreciate the trees, and I think they're, especially the oaks, I think we really have to be good stewards if they're on our property, and that's really important. So caveat emptor, if you buy a property with oaks, I hope you like them and don't want to cut them down, because it takes a rare circumstance certainly for me to approve that, but I do think in this case that it is certainly something that does need to be, I'm fine with it coming down. I think that in terms of an oak on the property, if you already have 7, I'd much rather you have another tree that you like and put your money towards really taking care of the other trees that are there, because that's important. And we've been talking about trees. This is not new. We've been tagging trees. It started in the 1980s around here. So this town and people that have been on the council before us have always felt these trees were important. And you can probably go and see them, the tags on these trees or near the sidewalks. They didn't do them on personal property, but it takes a lot for me to agree that a tree can come down. So take care of your trees out there. I just want to make a comment about, I'm always disappointed with these arborist reports. they're so important for us making a decision, and they're always so terrible. I mean, they're all over the place. They don't have the information we need. I really think that we've really got to do something about that because it doesn't give us the information for us to make good decisions. So I don't know if the staff can have a list of arborists that know how to write a report, but I'd sure like to see that. So I think that the tree can come down, in my opinion. Take care of your other trees. Be forewarned. Don't come back and want to start chopping stuff down. So sorry. And I'm fine with something else on the property, but at least 2 more oaks have to be purchased and put someplace else. I don't know how you guys figure that out. I don't know if the cemetery needs any more trees. They don't really have water, but you guys can help with that. So that's my opinion.
Okay. I look at the arborist report as being so blatantly diseased that it didn't require additional detail, not that it was intentionally lacking. There are times when trees get diseased and need to come down, and it's a safety issue. So I have no problem with that. We all have experience with oak trees. We all prefer to preserve them, but we also have to preserve our residents first and foremost. I find it acceptable. I live in an area where there are too many oak trees to have them all survive. There's no question about that. And it's a matter of time when they start to cannibalize each other. So I have no problem with you selecting a different species that, working with staff, you find is appropriate on the property, and then 2 oak trees elsewhere.
All right. There is a section of our code where there's a list of approvable trees. It would likely just include a phrase saying applicant chooses some tree on that list, and there's dozens and dozens of
Yeah,
species
and I think
to choose from.
that also goes to some of the concerns Councilmember Dornbecker was alluding to about how do we know about the criteria for consideration. Replacing a tree will help kind of, in my opinion, preserve the character of that part of the property, so it makes sense, the amount of shade, the amount of water runoff and that type of thing, so soil erosion. But I do think it's appropriate that if a heritage tree is coming down, that oak trees are replaced. I'm open to somewhere in the vicinity of the cemetery, if that makes sense, but we also have major park modification going on that can also benefit from that down at Veterans Memorial Park. So I'm happy to leave the location up to a conversation with the applicant and the staff. So unless there's other discussion, is there action to be presented on this item?
I'll make a motion that we adopt resolution number 16-3375, authorizing the removal of one 30 to 36
inch
diameter.
Thank you.
36.
DBH. Hey, don't.
No, sorry.
Coast Live Oak at 2940 Lincoln Avenue, with the change that one of the trees planted on the property will be from the town's acceptable list.
You good with that language,
Yes.
Nathan?
Not that
I'll
nasty
second.
part in the middle.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
That passes unanimously. Thank you. Thank you very much. And so if you'll just work with our staff to find out what species are possible and how to go through with the whole process.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, Municipal Code Amendment, introduce and waive first reading of ordinance amending our code. Yes.
Yes, I'm presenting on this item.
All right, Gary, let's hear it.
So staff has identified several technical or straightforward amendments to the municipal code, and there are others as well that may be coming forward in the future. But for purposes of this ordinance, there are 4 basic changes here. The first one is a change to the vacancy provisions in the office of mayor. The state in 2014 amended the government code to require the council to fill the vacancy within 60 days or call an election. The municipal code provided that it must be filled within 30 days or call an election. So this change just switches 30 days to 60 days to bring it in line with state law. And I'm happy to answer any questions on that, or I can just keep going through each of them.
Go ahead.
Okay.
We'll ask questions at the end.
The second one is a fourth exception to the permit requirement, the item that was just up before, for trees that present an immediate danger of collapse and immediate action is needed for the safety of life or property. Prior to the destruction or removal of the tree, they would still have to notify the planning officer, and improper removal would still be subject to fines and penalties. And I understand from Nathan and also Sandra that this is something that staff wanted to put forward, and they might be able to provide a little more background on that. But there would be a fourth exception that would be put in there. The other three exceptions include that the tree is certified dead by an arborist, tree removal is specifically approved as part of a development entitlement like a use permit, and routine maintenance of a protected tree does not require a permit. So those three exceptions are already in place, and this would add a fourth one.
Just real quickly on that one, if you may recall, we've had some situations in storm events or something where a tree may be damaged, and we've been needing the emergency approval in order to do that. So we're just trying to make sure and clean that up. Very limited, but in some cases, that's where we're really talking about.
Sounds like Vice Mayor Dornbecker has a question, so we'll do it one item at a time, so go ahead.
Thank you for the promotion.
Did I say, I'm wrong again? All right, anyway.
Anyway,
Councilmember,
what
please.
disturbs me is that had this been in the ordinance when we were evaluating allowing the Stewart Wine Company to remove the tree from their property, we wouldn't have had the opportunity to stop them from doing that.
No, I don't agree. This exception is very narrow, and when we look at it in totality, it's an emergency, and it provides for staff having to certify the emergency, and our definition of emergency, not the applicant's. I don't know if you want to expand, Sandra, or...
Well, we had multiple reports that were evaluating the condition differently, and so that also created a different situation.
I want to clarify, this is a good conversation from when we talk about emergency, we're not talking about arborist report saying, I'm talking about we've had a windstorm, we've had a tree drop a branch, and it's imbalanced and things like that. We're talking about these types of emergencies. So that's what we're really trying to address, is when something has happened. We're not talking about consideration of the arborist report. That will come back to you because that has time. What we're talking about is, in a storm event or a situation, there's no council meeting, it's potentially dangerous in the environment that is left and maintained. That's the type of exemption that we're talking about here.
Does that clarify?
Well, it does, but to me, it opens a door. Can I ask the town attorney to address that? Does it, for someone who wants to develop a property and, comes in and says they're going to develop it and make that tree a centerpiece of the whole development, and then come back and say to us, well, no, that tree is going to fall over at any moment, it's going to collapse, it's in immediate danger of collapse, and then does this kick in? I mean, or can we then say to that applicant, no, you cannot do that? I mean, I don't want to be in a position where someone could,
So it would leave the discretion at the staff level. So under your scenario, if the person came in and said, in our opinion, this is an imminent threat and it's about to fall over and we're going to cut it down, and staff said, no, we do not agree, this is not an imminent threat, and they did it anyway, they would be subject to penalties and fines and enforcement under the municipal code. But staff would have discretion to say, we agree, and the person would be able to cut down that tree without coming to the council for approval.
And the point of that being a staff-level decision is, in real time, to call an emergency meeting of the council may not be possible.
That's exactly right.
I think this is really, I don't know if language to be added of natural disaster, we don't know what it might be. Fire, it could be earthquake, it could be a vehicle running into a tree, it could be any number of things that create an emergency condition, not that I'd like to build a building there and it's
I think the planning scenario really is not an appropriate one and that we're talking about. We have had a situation with storm damage. You may recall there was a tree on North Jefferson. And so this is where staff's intention is, or we've had a tree that has a canopy and a major limb comes off. We don't always know why, but it leaves the balance of the tree in a precarious situation. This is from staff's potential what we're really talking about when we say immediate danger of collapse and requires. If we need to strengthen that, we'd certainly be willing to, but we're not talking about based on an arborist report by the applicant. We're talking about your staff making a determination that the tree, and maybe that's the clarification that we need to make.
Actually, I think the clarification needs, maybe can be made in the owner must notify. It should be.
It actually does say that.
does
Prior-
say
I, no, I'm saying that's not strong enough. I'm saying the owner must get permission or authorization from.
Subject to town manager.
Because if you could argue,
Okay.
this says, all I had to do was tell you I'm going to cut it down.
Let's change that,
Yeah.
because I think you're correct. What we're really intending here is that staff, we need to take the responsibility of saying, we've reviewed it and it's in a.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's the intent that we have on that.
Yeah.
But I-
That's what I wanted. Sandra, Gary, and then we'll come back up here.
What we're looking for is an exception that allows for the most obvious circumstance of a tree that's a hazard, and we want to take it down. We know the council's position on preservation of trees. The whole tree ordinance goes into the extra duty of care for heritage trees. So I think we read all of that together when we're looking at whether a tree poses a hazard, and if there's any level of discretion or any element of disagreement as to the level of that threat, we would definitely bring it to council. I agree that your recommended change, that they have to receive approval from staff before they take it out, is important. And we did share some of the concerns that Member Dornbecker raised, that it could be used as a tool to take out trees that aren't diseased. But I think based on our understanding of the council's intent, the way the rest of the ordinance is written, and maybe with some changes to tighten that up, we think it could be useful.
So, Gary?
Yeah, I would suggest language then to strike notify and include receive approval from the planning officer in its place then.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Vice Mayor, did you have a comment about that? Follow up?
Well, I would just say I'd like to even strengthen it further. Instead of require approval, the very first, this tree permit exception requires a permit. I mean, I want somebody to write something down and sign their name to it, not just, well, I thought that's what the phone call was, or I thought somebody said this. So I want a piece of paper. And I'm fine with an emergency situation, the town staff doing it, but.
That's what this is.
Right, but that's what it
requires a permit.
It already does.
Okay,
Correct?
I'm not clear on what you're asking that's different. It already requires a signature and a document.
No, I
It's an
understand where she's
exception from the
coming
permit
Yeah.
requirement.
We have a situation that says a tree removal permit is not required. I think this language needs to be changed to say exceptions may be granted subject to submission.
Issuing a permit, yeah,
Because what I say,
right.
there's a sort of an unintended negative in the way that
Right.
particular section is written.
If I might just add to that, each of the three current exceptions already have some kind of approval process in it. So, for example, the first one requires approval from the planning officer. The second one would be as part of an entitlement application that's come through
Right.
up to the council. The third one is routine maintenance in the opinion of the planning officer. And then the fourth one, we are now adding also approval. So I'm not sure if that quite gets to the same, but it seems that there's already an approval process in each of them, but happy to switch that language up too. I just wanted to point that out.
I would like to suggest that a tree removal permit is not required, be stricken, because I could see people using that as unintended.
Yep, me too.
I just think we leave it as exceptions.
Good.
Yeah, so then each of these would need additional language then because.
Right, I think, yeah, slight modifications, maybe we could.
Cleaner and safer.
Okay.
Thank you.
You want to work on that later, or is that something we want to?
Well, this is a first ordinance, so.
Yeah, this is the first reading. We could bring it back. We could also remove this and bring it back. If I had about 5 minutes to sit down in a quiet place, I could do this.
Right, I know. That's why.
I think we know what you're getting at.
Okay, let's try to stay focused and not go into a full-on
Okay.
I think if we get the general direction that you're looking at, we're not changing the exceptions, we're clarifying them. I think, and I'm not the attorney here, but I'm going to suggest that we understand what you're looking for and we can have those directions made for second reading and make sure that they're ready.
Yeah.
Can the modification be made prior to second, or does it have to be?
If the language is not approved tonight, it would have to come back for first reading on the second part. So if we are going to draft additional language, it might make sense just to remove this, have that language.
Bring it back on the 18th.
As a separate, and then the rest of them would be on second reading next time.
Okay. So let's see what else we might modify in these other two to get through the staff report.
Okay.
Or accept on their face. That'd be fine.
All right, so moving on, the next two sections of the ordinance, Section 3 and Section 4, have to do with utilities encroaching in the public right-of-way and also removing trees here in town limits, either as ordered by the California Public Utilities Commission or as authorized by the Public Utilities Code. And there are state statutes that require them to come in. You often see they just kind of lop off the top of the trees, or they will get creative sometimes to meet the state requirements or a CPUC order. Under the current municipal code, they are required to get an annual permit from the town, but that permit does not require them to state when, where, or how this work will take place. And so under this amendment, at the time the permit is issued, they will submit an annual plan, any utility doing this type of work in the town, that explains a list of trees and the approximate date and location when the work will take place, so the town staff is aware of when this work is occurring. And Joe might be able to fill in some background on this as well.
Happy to fill in a little bit of background. So in the past, the utility companies knew what the language in the code said and were not very cooperative when it came to letting us know when and what they would trim. They would just say, we have an emergency trim, and they would come in and just start chopping away. So what we're trying to do with this revision is help encourage them to have a bit of a plan ahead of time, let us know what they're going to trim so that we can have some input on it and stop the sense of urgency that they create by not having an annual plan. We know that they know what they're going to trim. Their lack of planning should not create our own sense of urgency, and that's what we're trying to help encourage with this code amendment.
Questions about this?
No.
Do we have the authority to control that? Or can the utilities just say, we don't care that you want to know, we're going to do what we want?
So the state has not completely preempted this area of the law, and since a permit is already required for them to come in and get before they do the work, requiring an additional submission at the time that permit is issued is not a significant burden that would be preempted under state law, in my opinion. So other local jurisdictions require this, other cities in the state require this, and so this is something that is not unusual, and utility companies that are sophisticated like PG&E are aware of complying with this in other jurisdictions.
And I totally support adding the language. I'm just wondering if we actually have the authority to control their behavior. Because they butcher trees on a regular basis.
Well, we're not, just to be clear, there is comprehensive state requirements about how the work is completed. And this is not dictating that. This is simply saying, you come and get a permit and tell us when and how and where. But we're not going to, the town will not be specifying how the work is performed. That is very regulated under state law.
So we don't have the authority to control that.
I think
is the answer.
We have the ability to influence and be more informed and manage it. That's what we have.
But I do think it's still very valuable to potentially control the timing of their impact.
It gives us more tools with what staff is recommending, absolutely.
Any questions about this section?
No.
Okay, next one.
All right, finally, this is an exception, a proposed exception to the business license tax, also sometimes referred to as the lemonade stand exception. And this would exempt from the business license and tax provisions, so coming in and getting the license and also the applicable tax, a business of anyone under 18 with fewer than a determined amount in annual gross revenue. And that's an option for the town council for what that revenue limit would be. Some jurisdictions use $500, some go up to $1,000, and that would of course be up to the town council. I would add, though, that this is part of the business license and tax provisions, so this is technically a tax reduction because you're exempting someone from the provisions, so there's no requirement to go to a vote of the people. However, if in the future that amount were to be lowered, that would technically be a tax increase because you would be moving the threshold, and that would require a vote. So that's why I wanted to leave this amount up to decision, because once it's set, going down would need a vote, going back further up would not. And so that's a moving target.
There's no concern of yours about discrimination based on age?
No. 18 is not, over 40 would be an issue for age discrimination. So it's perfectly legal.
So, but somebody that's 19 or 20 that wants to have a cart and sell anything out of it would not be allowed to then?
Well, they would still be allowed to if they applied for and received a business license.
Right, but not under these
Not under this
conditions.
exception.
Right, okay. Any other questions from the council? Steve, did you have something to add?
We've had requests probably 1 to 2 every 3 years, so it's real. In some cases, we've been able to work with the family or the whatnot to help them, and part of our ideas we're going through is staff wants to be, our direction is we want to make sure we're enforcing the code that's written, and if there's issues that we want to clarify, bring them to you for direction. And we do think that while this doesn't happen often, if the Girl Scouts are out there, if somebody's doing a lemonade stand, we want to encourage that. That's still part of that. I just have this horrible vision of Yountville being portrayed as, a 12-year-old trying to raise money for Pathway Foundation. Town shuts them down. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't other issues that they would still have to comply with, but at least it allows us for the possibility to have something like that. That's what we're really talking about here.
Right. Council have a opinion on a threshold dollar amount?
Well, I really like Girl Scout cookies. How much do they sell? I mean, how do you?
That was once you throw them into the mix, you just threw the number way up higher.
That's right.
Well, don't they have permits based on the organization to be able to do that would be different than what we're talking about?
Some do, you're correct. I think what I would encourage you is to focus not so much on the dollar amount, but that it be high enough because it is going to be around for a while, as the town attorney pointed out. So you may want to look at even 1,500 or 2,000. Doesn't mean that, what we're really saying is it just needs to be, the kids are not going to be a economic force. They're not going to be taking out one of our businesses if they earn $2,000 a year in cookies or lemonade.
But
Go ahead, Vice Mayor.
Would it make any sense to put something in there about a temporary business? I know when you add another word, that just brings up all other things, but because that's really the intent, is the lemonade stand or coming in and selling cookies or going by and raising money so your soccer team can go wherever they need to go. I mean, would that help?
That can certainly be added, and it could be language to the end, to some of the effect of for an annual gross revenue for 6 or fewer months in a 12-month period, or something to that effect.
And that way we don't have to come up with a dollar amount? I like that wording. Does that get us out off this?
I actually like the dollar amount more than the temporary, because that just creates another also challenging enforcement arm. But
that's correct.
It's very arbitrary. Not that the dollar amount isn't also to say 6 months versus 12 months versus 4 months. Right. I don't know about the rest of the council, but
I do agree that there might be an enforcement issue with trying to determine the number of months in operation, especially if it is a temporary or somewhat mobile business. Mm-hmm. The dollar amount, if it is low enough, would presumably put an inherent restriction on how long it could be in. For example, if it was $1,000, I can't imagine a business
$90 a month.
Right. So.
But that's not going to block Girl Scout cookies?
I don't believe it will. I will look into that specifically.
Girl Scouts do operate under. I'm struggling with what the right terminology is, but what this is really is
a national permit.
Right. A local Girl Scout may set up a stand in her front yard, and I think that's what we're talking about.
It's a national
total entity
fundraising enterprise.
And I
It's
will
a
point out,
for-profit business.
We still require, in order for the person, what happens periodically is the parents will call and say, can we do this? We want to make sure we're doing it right. You'll note this still requires them to write an outline and something that we have to respond to. So it's not like they completely just get to go do it and there's no awareness. It does require us to have a verified statement.
I think we're getting some financial advice from our finance director on this.
Yes, I would also add that Girl Scouts and also the school that may be doing a fundraiser, these are for charitable and nonprofit purposes, whereas this is specifically for-profit business. So someone who's actually trying to make a profit, if that helps alleviate any of the concern.
That might do it.
1,500.
Transacting a for-profit business in the town?
Well, all of the business license and tax provisions
are
apply to
for-profit.
for-profit.
Okay.
So it's part of the broader chapter.
Councilmember Durham is recommending $1,500 cap. Other thoughts from the council?
How do we determine that?
They have to report it. That's what Steve was just saying, is that they still have to notify the town they're doing this and follow certain procedures for having the business, whether it's a casual stand or a cart or anything like that.
But no permit?
Well, when we say, it actually, here, it says that they have to, it's basically an exemption from the payment of the business license. So they still have to give us some information in a form and things like that.
That's right. So for this to apply, it would require the business operator to come in, sign under penalty of perjury. I'm under 18. I make less than $1,500.
That's good enough for me.
And penalty of perjury.
I will point out, as the town attorney is alluding to, Section D talks about the tax collector, which is everybody's favorite person. After giving notice and reasonable opportunity, revoke the license. So we actually do give the child or the applicant here something, and we manage it. In most cases, like I say, we get a request probably one a year, and usually most of the parents have decided not to pursue it when we say, here's the application process and what you've got to go through and the fees associated with it, because in some cases it's really been, we want them to learn a little bit about entrepreneurialism or
Yeah,
something.
so we're not approving this tonight, so I think we've talked this thing, all we need to at this point. Unless there's any really critical changes, modifications, questions that still exist. We've covered the lemonade stand provision, I think.
Did council agree on the $1,500 amount? Did I hear that?
Sure we did.
Did you?
Sure we did.
Yes.
I agree.
We did.
Consensus.
Okay.
We did. And so really, the $1,500 threshold for that language there, then the exceptions in the what was the second one? The tree permit exceptions. We got that language already covered. That's going to come back to us. We're going to table this thing.
Right. Yes, so there are two options at this point. You could table the entire ordinance and we could bring this back for a first reading, or the council could simply remove Section 2 completely, approve the rest of the provisions with the dollar amount, and then this could come back for second reading, and then we could bring Section 2 back.
I'm going to propose that we postpone this until the 18th. There's nothing on here that I think is that time sensitive, and it just will create more complication, I think, than it's worth.
That works.
Any problem with that from the
No.
council?
No.
Okay, so we're going to continue this to our meeting on the 18th.
Do we need a motion saying that?
Sure.
Do we?
No.
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 So we don't.
Okay.
Let's move ahead. We've got some other business. Water emergency conservation regulations.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of the council, tonight we have a resolution to reestablish the Water Conservation Phase 1. This will result in compliance with the governor's most recent recommendation and is the latest in a string of conservation measures proposed by the governor and his staff to help during the drought. Back in January of 2014, the governor declared a drought state of emergency. This body actually heard a similar proposal to what a resolution to what I'm presenting tonight, and you all agreed to implement Phase 1 of the water emergency regulations. However, there have been several iterations of the governor's attempt to help us conserve water during the drought. Most recently, in 2015, they issued a board a notice of surface water shortage and to curtail water right diversions. They issued a proclamation of continued state of emergency in April 2015, and asked that the state conserve up to 20% of all water. In April 2016, the governor rescinded that order and directed the Department of Water Resources to develop and implement a plan for the Phase 1 water conservation and a self-reporting tool for water suppliers to match usage and conservation to a 3-year water supply estimate. As of February 2016, the state had reduced water by 25.5% as compared to the 2013 benchmark year. I think it's important to note for us that the town had reduced consumption by 28.1% for that same period. It was a remarkable amount of water to reduce and conserve. As I said, in 2014, the council updated the water conservation plan and voted in favor of a staff recommendation to use the municipal code in chapters 13.20 and 13.24 to implement the Phase 1 conservation measures. As with that evening and tonight as well, the voluntary conservation measures by customers are encouraged and publicized by the town. They include all customers are encouraged to reduce their monthly water consumption by a minimum of 10% from their customary monthly consumption. They are encouraged to immediately install water-saving devices in their plumbing appliances or improvements. All customers are also encouraged to limit the expansion or installation of new water-using appliances, plumbing or improvements such as lawns, gardens, landscapings, pools, sprinklers, irrigation systems, washdown equipment, larger washing machines, or garbage disposal units. Customers are encouraged to only wash cars, other vehicles, and other hard surfaces from buckets with a quick rinse from a hose equipped with an automatic shutoff nozzle. The installation of any required landscaping could be deferred with the appropriate deferral agreement. All persons are encouraged to place an increased emphasis on fire protection. Schools, churches, and other professional groups are encouraged to discuss water conservation as a regular agenda item and to forward worthwhile suggestions to the town planning department for consideration. As a public agency, we are going to encourage and establish an irrigation program of hand watering where appropriate, use of automatic shutoff nozzles, and watering at night between the hours of 7 p.m. and 10 a.m. Additionally, all people in town who are wasting water will be notified by the town that they are wasting water, that wasting water is prohibited by chapters 13.0 and 13.24, and is sufficient reason for the town to discontinue service to the customer's premises should that practice continue. In addition, during a Phase 1 water emergency, the following administrative practices are followed. The town will bill customers on a monthly basis for water used. It will be based on the amount of water used. Customers will be notified if their usage during the billing period exceeded the amount they would be allowed under a Phase 2 emergency. And any applicant for a building permit for construction that may be affected by the existence of a Phase 3 or 4 water emergency should be informed of the impact of these phases prior to the issuance of a building permit, but lack of such notice shall not permit a new water connection that is otherwise prohibitive. We also participate in several water conservation programs as a town, including the residential clothes washer program. The town provides a $50 incentive towards the purchase of a water efficient washer and $200 towards the purchase of an Energy Star rated most efficient washer. This program is currently ongoing, as is the high efficiency toilet program and Prop 84 grant, which calls for toilets with a maximum of 1.6 gallons per flush. New requirements call for a maximum of 1.28 gallons per flush. We also will participate in the Cash for Grass program. It was fully operational as of mid-2014. Funding is continuing, although it's not clear for how much longer. However, we will participate with that program for as long as the program continues. We are recommending that you adopt the resolution this evening and implement the phase water emergency measures. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Joe. Questions? Councilmember Doran Becker.
Well, it's not a question, so I'll hold it for, when we're having.
So we're commenting?
Yeah, commenting.
All right. Questions?
I've got a question.
Councilmember Durham.
When you pull out your blinking sign on wheels that says even houses, water on Monday, Wednesday, and odd houses, is that just a suggestion so that people are paying attention to what they do?
Under the current resolution, that was a requirement.
Very good.
Based on the governor's recommendation and our own requirement to try to reduce water usage by up to 20%. With this current resolution that we're presenting tonight, that would not be the case. We would encourage people to save 10%, but it would be entirely voluntary.
Wow.
So you're basically backing off the mandatory to a voluntary.
That's absolutely
generally
correct,
what
Mayor.
we're talking about. Vice Mayor?
And we're the last ones in the valley to actually go here, from what I understand. Calistoga has repealed, American Canyon, Napa. I don't know what Santa Elena is doing.
Calistoga and Santa Elena are having ordinances similar to what we're proposing this evening. It's my understanding that Napa and American Canyon have completely backed off. This
Okay.
is what the governor recommends, and that's why we're proposing this
Right.
evening. Actually, the Department of Water Resources.
Okay, thanks.
Any member of the public? Seeing none, we'll have discussion or action from council on this item. Anyone make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve resolution number 16-3376, implementation of Phase 1 water emergency regulations. My comment is, we're already doing all of it.
We want to continue to do it.
Yes. I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, that is unanimously passed. Thank you. Is there timeliness to the Plan Bay Area 2040 preferred scenario topic?
Yes, there is.
Okay, Sandra.
So Plan Bay Area 2040 draft preferred scenario has been released for review. Plan Bay Area is a regional plan that forecasts household and employment growth in the area and creates a blueprint or a program for trying to meet that household growth. The plan focuses development in priority development areas. Those are PDAs, and those are neighborhoods that are located adjacent to public transit and are appropriate for compact development. There are only 2 PDAs in Napa. That's American Canyon and City of Napa, so that's where growth in this county will be concentrated. Over the next 25-year period, the plan projects 56,000 new households in Napa. Only 100 of those are allocated to Yountville because we have no PDAs. That averages 4 new housing units a year, and that's generally what we achieve through second dwellings on an annual basis or other new buildings. So MTC and ABAG are seeking comments on this plan. They're due a week from Friday, should we have any comments. My recommendation would be to simply receive the report that we have very low projected housing, very likely what we can accommodate over the plan. So it's introduced for information and comment should you have any.
And MTC and ABAG are actually working together on this?
So we hear.
I wouldn't go that far.
Hard to believe.
Questions about the report or the draft scenario? Councilmember Dornbecker?
Well, I do have one, and that is that 100 units of housing in our town, we don't even have room to build 100 more homes in our town. So what does it mean if we cannot accomplish that by 2040? Or whenever this is?
Well, it's looking over a 25-year period, and it's in association with the RENA numbers, but it's not strictly tied to them. So what we have to do is prove we have sufficient land to develop housing. Doesn't mean we have to develop it. We have sufficient land. When you look at the second dwellings that are possible on all the parcels in town, that alone might meet the demand.
Not houses necessarily.
Yeah.
They can be granny units, apartments.
Granny units.
Oh, I see.
Second dwellings,
Yeah.
granny units.
Units.
We have such small,
Yeah, and of course, these are projections, these are sort of goals and policies to look after. The Plan Bay Area doesn't change any of our local policies, our zoning, it doesn't force us to approve projects, so.
Well, the other thing is, aren't we allowed now to trade housing credits in the county? I believe that's part of this, that we can actually trade with a jurisdiction that would like to embrace it, and then they get some financial benefit
Yeah.
from actually building those houses.
We've
or
done that
those
in the
units.
past with the Royal Grande. 5 of those units are the county's units. So, yeah, there's that trading available within the county.
And the City of American Canyon and the City of Napa have stated they want to absorb as much housing in their transit corridor areas especially. So they would be likely candidates. I mean, they do projects that have hundreds or thousands of units. So
Yeah.
we could potentially trade off with either of those, if not others.
Would there be a monetary investment required of us to do that?
To do a trade, there's generally a little trading in that manner.
I think we want to also be careful that when we look at this, we're looking at a 25-year period. So we're also not necessarily looking at only affordable. This is that we're building, so the majority of the housing stock, for example, it's simple, but you've already approved a apartment with the handwritten project, for example. And we occasionally see a request to put, a garage replaced with a unit above. So it's market as well as some of the affordable that we could be doing. We also have the opportunity to potentially, over a 25-year horizon, look at what development opportunities or redevelopment of staff housing, for example, on the veterans' home. So if they were to improve opportunities for their own employees to live on property, that's in the town's limits. So I don't think 100 units over the 25-year horizon. If you look at the charts, you'll find that it's one of the very smallest numbers. So I don't want us to create that's that order of magnitude that, it does sound, but it could very well mean that, density might change. A one-story maybe ultimately, down the road developed as a 2-story. And those are the things that our community is going to have to wrestle with as we meet those types of housing expectations and what the conditions are in 2040.
Thank you.
Our past trends show that we're meeting this number of 4 units a year too, so it's not really that big a number.
I think ours is in 17 is our current RENA cycle,
Mhm.
total
That's what I
units.
was-
Yeah.
Well, I think the most important thing is I think this report's going to change between now and 2040, so.
It changes every 4 years.
Exactly, so, I have no problem with it, because what's going to happen 4 years from now is probably going to be a much bigger problem than what we've got to deal with right now, so I wouldn't make any changes.
Do you need action to receive the report as presented?
No.
Council okay with receiving the report as presented, the draft report?
We received it.
fine.
Thank you
All
very
right,
much.
very good. Thank you. Very timely delivery of that. Any additional staff informational reports? Very quickly, Napa Valley Transportation Authority, the 2 issues that pertain to us. One, there was a maintenance funding plan that was approved by the board, in particular the section south of us basically, to Napa. And also ribbon cutting was set for October 21st, 1 to 3 o'clock, I believe, to formally open the trail that's been open for several months.
Mayor, I believe it's 3 to 5.
3 to 5? Okay. I wanted to get there early.
And
It's been used by the whole valley for months, so
point out, once
this is
we
a
know a little
formality.
bit more about the logistics, staff will help to coordinate those of you that may want to ride, if for example, if they're riding.
We have
from
our historic
point A to
resource
B.
meeting at 2.
Right,
so-
some of us may want to participate that way, and we'll coordinate either a drop-off or a bicycle.
I'll
pickup.
drive.
Okay.
Don't ride your bike.
The trolley is not available. It's outside the town limits.
That is correct.
Moving on to other reports and announcements, I just want to very quickly update the council as of this morning on the Napa Unified School District talks about merging the Elmville Elementary School with Stonebridge Elementary. Without going into all the details, because it's rather onerous and there is no consensus on a plan yet. There is going to be another 2-hour meeting of the advisory committee on Monday to continue to vet the options that are being discussed that include but are not limited to merging the 2 schools onto the Elmville campus. The biggest development this morning was the receipt of draft architectural renderings of how it might fit on this campus. How it might fit on this campus is the key term there. There are concerns by both Yountville Elementary and Stonebridge representatives about what that looked like. Certainly I had my share of concerns as well. So we're going to continue to analyze that on Monday. There is another meeting on, I believe, the 25th for the general public to attend. The district is looking to go to the board for consideration on November 3rd with possible action on a plan. They're meeting later in November. So I'm on this advisory committee meeting every week, and I'll continue to update as I think is appropriate.
Quick question then, did I read appropriately that there is consideration of moving the gas line at Stonebridge?
It's one of about a dozen options that's being vetted.
All right.
One of the other critical pieces that we hope to have by next Monday is word from the State Board of Education if the existing Stonebridge campus is viable to consider or not. It might depend on the location of the gas line. It might depend on their interpretation of the seismic activity on that parcel. They may decide it's just not safe, gas line or no gas line. And that will narrow the options we have to consider. Other sites to build Stonebridge separate and keep Yountville independent have been discussed and are being looked at. But the district is looking also to try to find a little over $200 million shortfall in their budget. And so to invest multiple millions of dollars in under 400 kids is kind of a challenge that we're all working through. So to be continued. Those are my other reports. Any others from the council? Announcements, I believe Vice Mayor, Councilmember Dornbecker and I are all headed down to Long Beach for the League of California Cities. I don't think you're going yet. Annual conference. I am going to be sworn in on Friday as a member of the statewide executive board for the league. So hopefully that will help us and in the North Bay Division to have even more representation. Vacaville Councilmember Curtis Hunt is also staying on the board as an at-large appointee. So we'll have two voices instead of just one for the North Bay Division. So hopefully that'll be a good thing. Any other information to be shared? I know we don't have our Park and Recs director here, but I want to recognize all of our staff for the Yountville Days Parade, minus the festival. In particular, all of our public works teams that worked multiple days to stagger all the operational logistics that were needed. The decision on the previous Thursday to cancel the parade, I think, was the right decision. It was the festival.
The two of you.
Between all of us, we'll get this straight.
Not all of us.
It was the right call. We did have rain during the parade. It was really to protect the nonprofit vendors that would have had to put out substantial money and then maybe not reaped any rewards from that. So it felt like something was missing in the afternoon, but the parade was still a lot of fun. We got a little wet, but it didn't really matter. And again, congratulations to the Knight family for representing the parade as the Grand Marshals. But also Samantha and her whole Park and Recs team. I'm not going to just thank the Public Works folks. They did a significant amount of work to make this happen this year and was really additionally challenged with the weather conditions. So kudos to all of them.
We didn't have to climb into an empty balloon basket.
That's years ago. So that's it for reports and announcements. I see no closed session, so I'll entertain a motion for adjournment to our meeting on Tuesday, October 18th.
So moved.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That passes unanimously. Good night, everyone.